and fratricide that happens like in Afghanistan with units and all that. Like that's just war, man. Like crap happens. You know, guys shoot at guys that shouldn't be shooting at each other, and you just realize like I am really not in as much control as I think. You can control like your assault to a degree of like where you want to enter, you know, who's going to be in what positions and all that kind of stuff. But once it goes down, it's very much you don't know what's going to happen. You know, that's where you realize like this is no game anymore. Like we are actually going out, and we might not come home. Or got in, plugged into the teams. He had some buddy or something like that. But it was, I mean, I remember when they first introduced it to us at Buds and the Dieter stuff, and we were like, "This is, man, like,
yeah, you're like, how's this even possibly going to work?"
Yeah.
What is it? No, it's not. I'm trying to think. There is a martial art that it's like named after, and it's or not named after, the open hand strikes and stuff, and it's because it's like. They say it creates like a momentum and like, you know, you're able to spin the guy and stuff. And
I can't remember the name of that, but like Dwayne was like, you know, he very, and he embellished all his, you know, background stuff. Like, you know, he studied all these different martial arts, and he would study these different martial arts, and then he'd go to different bars and he'd get in fights and then test out different martial arts, you know, to see how they worked. And then like he came up with this system, the Dieter system that was being used at the time. And all of his little cronies were like, I mean, they were nothing short of like drinking the Kool-Aid, you know, putting their shoes under the bed type thing. They were like 100% soul disciples of it, and they were weird. Like he had like a weird little following. It was a weird, it was weird.
How long did that last for?
Man, he had control of most of the combatives, at least through my first rotation, my first platoon, and then he kind of went, somebody finally realized, like, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Like, why aren't we incorporating just jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai stuff? Because that's what works.
Yeah.
I mean, like, again, like, what works in a fight? Go to UFC, you know, go to fights, like actual real fights. Like, you know, Dwayne's not going to get in a cage with a dude that is, you know, learned in Muay Thai and jiu-jitsu and use his stuff and win, you know.
A Gracie.
But he would always argue that, like, it's my system is for operators, you know, with all their kit and all their guns and all that kind of stuff. So because it was all open hand, so you're not hurting your knuckle or anything. But it was weird, man. I mean, the weirdest moment was, so there was like these levels of Dieter. Like he had like this circle, and then like there was all these like varying levels, like up to level 10 type thing.
Okay.
And this one instructor that was like a sole disciple of it, he brought our class around, and he had this dummy that he was, you know, acting like the dummy was the criminal that broke into his house. And he's like, yeah, so I come in my house and I see the doors broken open, and I know somebody's in there, and I know my wife and kids are home, but I don't know, you know, where the guy is. And level 1. And then he's like, I'm coming through the kitchen. I start to hear noise upstairs. Level 2. I'm coming up the stairs. I start to hear my wife screaming. Level 3. And then like he went all the way up to like level 10 was like he came in the room and his wife was being raped, and he like mounted this dummy, and he's starting to hit it like at his level 1, level 2, all the way up. And like he's level 10, and he's just like, like these open hand strikes on this dummy. And then he was like crying like after the demo. Like he worked himself up so bad that he was like crying. And we're all looking at each other like, what the hell's going on right now? Apparently level 10 is.
If you told people this, I've never heard this before. If this is what we were talking about earlier, it's like if people hear this and this is what the combatives was for the SEAL teams in Richmond, they'll be like, what? And this is, you know, well after the UFC had kind of been getting the ball rolling. That's crazy. Would not have expected that. It
was weird, yeah. Like he was legitimately crying, and he's like, yeah, that's just the level of, you know, emotion that you got to bring it to level 10 if you want to get to level 10. And it's like, we're like, I don't want to be at level 10. This is too weird.
Yeah, I don't want to. I mean, I feel like even
how about level 10? I just go in there and just friggin' jump on the guy and choke him out. I mean,
it's like,
I mean, like,
what we were talking about. I feel like if you're in a situation you guys would find yourselves in that, hand to hand's necessary, a level 10 isn't where you want to be, because that's when you're like,
Yeah, you're
crying.
Yeah, you're basically like, you're like, you're so hyper focused on the situation in hand that you kind of lose situation awareness of like the bigger picture of like, hey, what is your purpose on the assault? Like, are you just getting wrapped up in this one little encounter with this guy to a degree that you're actually being taken out from like what you need to maybe be focusing on in the assault? Like, how about not just maybe choke the guy out or use some jiu-jitsu thing, get control of him, zip cuff him, and then we'll go move on to like something else you need to clear or something like that,
Yeah, I had Kevin Donaldson on. We were talking about police department, same thing, where it's like a lot of times their hand-to-hand training is just so minimal. And I always say, like, a lot of the situations you see that happen on the street that obviously cause tons of controversy and everything, it's like, if you're a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, which is only, 2 years, I'm like, you can control another human being much easier.
Yeah.
And the thing is, so they don't have that training. And then most people, you go on Twitter or whatever, they're like, well, why don't you just hold them down? And it's like,
you don't understand how hard that can be if you don't have freaking the right, angles on where you're holding them or your
grips
or
and
your,
everything.
where you're shifting your weight on them. Jiu-jitsu for law enforcement is like, in my opinion, because like, what are you doing most of the time? You're freaking putting people in cuffs, taking people out of cars, and if they get squirrely, which, a lot of areas by me in South Peoria, like get squirrely, like, you can sometimes just get through a lot of it just by being a brute, and like just being aggressive.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, because like in my opinion, like most fights, like bar fights and all that kind of stuff, and just fights in general, just the most aggressive guy usually wins.
Yeah.
Now if you have training that can help, but it's usually just like violence of action and aggression that can win fights. And but like if you get some dude that's hopped up on something and he's a lot more powerful than you, and you don't know how to kind of manipulate, his joints and different things in order to gain control of them, like you're just gonna get friggin' worked over, man.
Yeah, the two things I say is, like, you've seen this, but people can take a gunshot when they're up on drugs and everything. Like, there are guys that will take 9 gunshots.
Yeah,
and
so especially if it's
still
like they're out, like if they're having excited delirium.
Yeah,
like, dude, you could tase them, and they're still coming at you.
yeah, and so a punch isn't going to do anything.
No.
It's going to knock the lights out.
No.
At least if you bring it to the ground and you know what you're doing. The thing is, like, a lot, we're talking about like actual fights. If you're in a bar fight, whatever.
Yeah.
The danger about jiu-jitsu is you bring it to the ground. One of their buddies comes and kicks you in the back of the head or something. Like, it's not a one-on-one. Majority of police confrontations and everything, or even situations you guys might face, it'll usually be kind of like a one-on-one quick exchange.
Yeah.
And that's when, the ground can really come into play. So yeah, it just blows my mind. It's like, you would think that would just be something. It's like, everyone's gonna be a blue belt. We're gonna do this.
Yeah. Did they start to incorporate that a long time ago?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a long time that he had the contracts with NSW doing the stuff, and then finally someone was just like, we need to get rid of this Dieter stuff.
It blows my mind.
ASAP.
Let's jump into it. So, Ben Wallick,
Really pumped.
Are we recording right now?
Yeah, we've been going for a little bit. But
I didn't.
yeah, I just let
I
it
didn't
go.
know, man.
Yeah, man, it's a perfect way to get into it. Just kind
Yeah,
of
that's cool.
Start talking.
That's cool, man.
But yeah, man, welcome down here. Thank you for making the trip to Texas.
Yeah, bud. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. One of the ways I love to jump to start off, we'll get into kind of your life and everything first, but we see it with the logo too. We'll pop it up on screen real quick, but you have one of the coolest logos I've seen in the company starting. How did you get the nickname?
Oh, I mean, you can imagine. Look at me. Vanilla Gorilla. I mean, like, and I've mentioned a bunch of these nicknames on other shows and stuff, like Snow Chimp, Powder, Almighty Whitey. I mean, basically, I was, a glow stick going through buds, and then at the team, and the gorilla thing kind of came from some other stories that were a little sketch, but just kind of the way that I eat, the way that I act. My laugh is super loud, like almost like a chimpanzee screaming. All that in the mix with the paleness kind of, set the stage for that. Yeah.
Hell yeah. I love that. It's funny how some of those nicknames pop up. I feel like we just had Daniel Corbett on and called him Dirty, and his nickname's Dirty. And it was like, how did that come about? And he goes, well, most people think it's like, he got like dirty in the field or this or that. And it was like, it just ended up, he was at a strip club and some stripper like made some advance towards him. And he's like, I'm that dirty or something.
And that's how, all those nicknames, like, I mean, typically like in the military, like a lot of times your nickname is probably going to be something related to your actual name, like a twist to it or something like that. But like pretty much every nickname of guys in the teams like had some sort of event or op or something that, you know, they got that nickname from. You know, like my one buddy wasn't a team guy, but he did GRS with me he's one of my close friends. You know, his nickname was Anvil because in Afghanistan he got hit by a Hilux, like a civilian, just ran him over, and he flew like 20 yards out in the field, but it hit his plate carrier and didn't get hurt, nothing, and so Anvil.
That's sick. Yeah.
You know? But it's always stuff like that like some little, you know, like I said, some specific thing happens and then that kind of sticks with you, and it could be something real menial too. It could be something just real small.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
That sticks.
There's some that are like you love the story, and then there's some where you'll tell it and you're kind of like, yeah. At first I was like, oh shit, like this is the nickname, and then you just kind of run with it. But like, you know, we had the same stuff in sports growing, like when I played in school and everything. It was the stupidest thing, like, you know, it could be embarrassing or good, and like that's your nickname. And at first you're like, no, don't call me that. And then a year later, it's even the coach is calling you that. And you're like, I guess that's how it is. You know?
And you never get to like nickname yourself.
Yeah.
You know, like because some guys will show up to platoon and then maybe they had a nickname previously. Yeah. And they're like, shut up, meat. That's not your nickname. We'll give you a nickname if you need a nickname.
I love that.
You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I tried to make my logo. It's funny, like kids have seen my logo or like, you know, other friends of the family and stuff. And they've actually said, they're like, is that you? And I was like, yeah, I tried to make it, you know, like a character version of me. Yeah. You know, so
no, it's perfect. I love that type of stuff too, because I mean, very simple logos obviously can maybe be a bit like cleaner per sense where it's just like, you know, whatever. But you need something to kind of stick. And it's like that you need that little bit of, you know, spice to it. Yeah. And that's the perfect amount of spice because it has all the elements to it, but it still has that kind of character animation and everything. It's like perfect. You know, I know there's always those designs too where it's like, you know, when it becomes a universal and you can toss it on a, you know, MacBook or your water bottle or whatever and like walk around with it and people are like, hey, what's that? It's like, that's a perfect logo. That's what you're looking for.
I mean, it's also the name is quirky, you know? So it's like someone sees the name and like even like like you see like the lettering on my shirt, like even that has an element of my personality because it's the Terminator like
logo
or like lettering.
Yeah.
Because I love freaking Schwarzenegger movies and I love the Terminator movies, and I'm like, when I was going through all the logo options, I'm like, oh yeah, I want the Terminator logo. So yeah, so people see the name and they're like, it's kind of quirky, and then they ask questions, and you know, that's kind of what I thought about it. So you
got to add your own spice to it. You know, it's the same with this thing. It's like you always got to have like, you know, I got well known for having all the weird ass LEDs and stuff. And it's just because like you got to toss in a little.
Yeah,
bit of
you have
spice.
something nostalgic with what you're putting out, and you know, sometimes people like different. You know? And because I was telling, you know, JP yesterday, I was telling him like, you know, there's so many company names out there that are just, they're just the typical names, you know, like Big Gun Tactical, like, you know, Monster Smash Tactical, like, you know, all these names like that it's like, dude, it's not really unique that much. And so, you know, now I've had this LLC since I did that CIA job. That's how I got paid, was like through that LLC. And when I had that job, the wife was making the LLC, and she's like, "What do you want the name of this company to be?" Because it was just on paper, you know, how they were going to pay me. And I was like, "Let's just call it Vanilla Gorilla Security," you know. So I already had the LLC, and I was like, you know what, I'll just take that and just roll with it and make with the company. So,
Is that very typical for if you're in? And we'll get to this in a little bit. But you get paid through registered LLC, like you go.
Yeah. So like pretty much all dudes that do contract work. Especially that GRS job, like that's how they're not just going to send a check to Ben Wallick. You know what I mean? They're paying
from the CIA.
They're paying the LLC. So, and just contract work in general, you always want to set yourself up as an LLC or an S corp or something like that for taxes and all kinds of stuff. So it always funnels all through that, whatever that corporation that you start.
Interesting. I didn't know that. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, but I can imagine check showing up at the front door from the CIA. There's probably like, they want a little bit of.
Well, they didn't pay the agency didn't like pay me directly. They like a subsidiary to them paid me. Yeah. But it's especially for taxes if you have an LLC and you're doing contract work, it's big benefit.
Perfect, man. Let's jump into it. So
Yeah.
I guess the best way to always start off is just, early life. So kind of where'd you grow up and, high school and all that? How did that really get going?
Yeah, kind of central Illinois, or I grew up like outside of Chicago, like the west suburbs. Yeah, I mean, mother and father. Mother was a housewife. Father did tree work. I had one brother 2.5 years younger, and then two younger sisters. They're 10 years apart from us, though. So mainly just my brother and I. Most of the time in our life, which my dad my dad will always say, like, yeah, I had to have a 10-year gap between you two and more kids, because it was my brother and I were
Out there.
Oh yeah, we were out there, and so my dad did tree labor. We had, luckily, west suburbs of Chicago, you don't have a lot of opportunities for like fishing, hunting, and stuff like that, which my dad was heavily into. But we had family friends about an hour and a half away that had land, and so we were always going up there to do stuff. He was taking us to do stuff, just because that is stuff he was into, was hunting, fishing, all that kind of stuff. So he just started incorporating that as in like very young age. I mean, I got pictures of me like, with squirrels at like, 6 years old that I shot with a 22.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, just really young. Shooting guns, doing outdoor stuff. We were never into video games and all that kind of stuff. Always outside.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, creating some sort of, most of the time it revolved around some sort of like army guy play.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
really?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
What do you think? I guess 2 questions with that is, one, did you find yourself naturally enjoying that kind of atmosphere, like hunting, fishing, being outside, being, a nature type person? And then adding with that, like, what do you think pushed the military aspect of like wanting to play? I mean, Army guys kind of.
Well, I just so I remember the very first time he took me squirrel hunting, and I just felt like, I don't know, like, I just thought it was like the coolest thing ever, that he just kind of sent me off in the woods by myself, and I'm just looking for something to kill. And then like that first squirrel that I killed, like there's like a switch in my brain. I was like, oh, this is awesome. I mean, it was like addictive. And then like, just, even if we weren't like hunting for something specific, and it was just like, hey, go out in the woods with the 22 and, shoot whatever you're going to shoot. I mean, chipmunks, whatever it might be, like that was, I mean, for me was like, I mean, I remember one time he was taking us hunting, and I was so excited that I got hives on my body.
Really?
Yeah, like I was that excited to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And naturally the into the gun stuff and into that type of, activities kind of got me into like wanting to go out and play Army, act like Army guys. I mean, it was all, Army guys, in the beginning, particularly because I'd also seen the movie Predator when I was really young. And that was like a life changer movie for me. I mean, I probably shouldn't have seen it as young as I was, but that put me on a trajectory of like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a commando. I got to go to the jungle. I got to do all this stuff,
Yeah.
And because it's really the greatest plot of, in my opinion, of any movie. I mean, a bunch of the baddest ass soft guys that exist, and like they're being hunted by an alien.
Yeah, who's like another kind of.
And then they have and then the baddest dude on the team has a showdown with the alien. I mean, you can't make movies like that anymore.
No, that's pure.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I was like painting myself in mud after I saw it, and my brother and my cousin and I spent a lot of time just doing that kind of stuff, where we would like, we would have all this toy Army stuff on us, and we'd go out and do these like missions that we planned. Like we had to like do reconnaissance on this house in the neighborhood, and not get caught, and like sneak through and come back, and we had. Some times where we got in trouble, and we got attacked by a dog one time because we were sneaking around houses and looking and stuff that we shouldn't have. And but it was just all like, I mean, that was like what we were obsessed with, was like painting our faces and acting like we were going on like some mission.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So was your brother was in kind of like the same arena? You guys both were kind of really into both those areas and everything?
Oh yeah.
How do you think that, having a brother with that too? I mean, I'm an only child, and this is like a funny perspective from my end. How do you think having a brother that closely aligned and, being into those same type of activities played into all that too? I mean, do you think it was nice to have that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it was awesome to, to have somebody that I could do that kind of stuff with. Like now, there was a huge competition stuff that went on.
That's what I was going to ask next. Yeah.
Massive. Like everything was a competition. Mm-hmm. I mean, we'd be like skipping rocks, in a pond, and like fighting over who got the most skips. I mean, it was constant competition. So there was a lot of this going on with him and I growing up. But at the end of the day, having a swim buddy to go out and do this stuff with was beneficial. Like, and that 2.5 year, is a good, it's not enough time, where I'm too older and I'm kind of, we're kind of into the same stuff, and so forth. And my brother's, he never went into the military or anything, but like, he's also just as kooky as I am. He runs a business called Peoria Carp Hunters, and you probably, some people watching this have probably even seen, because the video was viral a long time ago, but the Illinois River has these Asian carp that basically it's an invasive species, and they jump up in the river. Like if you go through with like any kind of aluminum deck boat or anything like that causes a lot of vibration, these fish jump like crazy. And he runs a bow fishing business on that river where he takes people out and they shoot them with bow. typical bow fishing is like grass carp, down in the water, but you shoot them aerial. It's aerial bow fishing.
Really?
Yeah. And
that's cool.
If you look it up, Peoria Carp Hunters, like there's a bunch of videos. Like I've been in a couple of them, because we were early on when we were messing around on that river with stuff, we think the same. Like growing up, we always thought the same with like whatever goofy thing we wanted to do. And so we were out on the river and these fish are going, you're talking hundreds and hundreds of fish jumping in the air. And we're driving around in this boat and we're like, hey man, like what if we skied through these things with like swords and various weapons and things like that? And he's like, yeah. So we made this video and we basically put on all kinds of gear. I had military gear, rucksacks that we put on with nets all over them. My brother had a whole garbage can suit with fish hooks off of it. And we were just skiing through these fish and impaling fish on tridents and cutting them with swords, and they were sticking on the fish hooks and all. Yeah. And it was great. And like my dad, like he came by the garage and we were forging these different weapons that we were going to ski through these, this array of fish with. And he's like, what are you guys doing? And then we kind of explained to him what we were going to do. And this is a long time ago. This is when we were like in our early 30s. And he's like, you guys got a wife, you got kids. He's like, you're in your 30s. He's like, when is this going to stop? Gives us this lecture, and then like, a couple days later, he shows up with this trident that he made for us. And he's like, look, I made you guys a trident.
And you're just like us.
Yeah. And the trident actually worked like better than most of the weapons that we had. And like, you just ski with that thing and all these fish are coming and they just start sticking on the thing.
Are you able to eat them?
They're not. Yeah, you can, but like
they ain't too good.
They're like northern pike if you've ever eaten or clean northern pike, where they got all these little Y bones and stuff. Like, and the problem is I wouldn't eat anything out of the Illinois River. It's friggin' gross.
Not good.
Yeah, it's gross. But yeah, that's just like the kind of stuff that that's just kind of the stuff that we did growing up, was just all outdoor stuff. My parents got us like a Sega Genesis one year for Christmas or something, and we played it for like a couple days, and we were like, let's go outside and freaking paint ourselves in mud and
arm and crawl around,
carve sticks and like weapons and try to stab chipmunks or something, just that kind of stuff,
real stuff.
Yeah, which is what kids need to be doing.
Agreed.
They need to get the hell out of the house, the hell off the screen, and go eat some dirt outside because they're just, again, it's just, I think in the next decade there's going to be so much more of the screen stuff available with virtual reality and stuff, where kids are just, it's almost going to become like a dying thing for kids to actually go outside and just play army in the woods and entertain yourself that way, because there's just all that stuff just hits the kids' dopamine in a way that other things can't trigger that, and it's just addictive.
Yeah, and you don't hang out with your friends anymore. And out and like we're out in the forest, and we kind of did something similar. We'd play paintball like all the time. Love that. And we'd always have one guy would draw a stick, someone would get the shortest end stick, and they'd have to dress up as a deer and then like run out in the forest. We give them some time, and then we're like, we're gonna go find them. It's funny enough, the Predator movie was like one of the things that we thought of with that too, because we watched that when we were younger, because we were all like action movies and stuff.
Yeah.
I remember, we'd have like the most fun with that. And that was us hanging out. But now it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to hang out with my friends. And like what they mean is they're loading, the Fortnite lobby, and they're going to hang out and talk on the mics there. And like, that's hanging out. Yeah. In a sense, like at least you're talking, but you're never going to get that same connection and like, weird story and everything. Like you just don't get that through a screen.
No.
That's what 90% of the time hanging out is now, you know?
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, it's like, hey, I'm getting online with my buddies. It's like, what? Like, no, why don't you call them and go outside and freaking go build a fort?
Yeah.
You know, because my buddies and I were heavily into paintball too in high school. Because like it was kind of like the natural trajectory of like I was heavily into like playing Army guns and Army different stuff. Like, and then once it was like right when paintball started coming out, like my buddies and I were like, oh man, it was the best thing ever. Like we went out to my buddy's farm in Wisconsin, my buddy's farm in Amboy, Illinois. We had like a whole paintball field set up. We had a 87 Chevy Astro van that we turned into like a paintball mobile. It had like a turret. It had tires on the front. We had all these different games that incorporated the paintball van in. I mean, and those were some of the greatest memories, you know, that I have.
Yeah.
I mean, I even went out after I was at the team. I went out and played paintball with them. I was on leave, and I brought all my friggin' weapons kit home and stuff because I was an ordnance guy. I just brought my whole box home. I'm sure you can't probably do that now, but I just grabbed it and put it in my truck and drove back to Illinois. And I had my nods in there and all that kind of stuff. And we went out to my buddy's land and played paintball. And I said, hey man, you guys want to have a night game? And they're like, yeah, fine, we'll have a night game. And I took IR chem lights that I already cracked. You know, the IR chem lights are the only ones you can see with nods, night vision. And I gave them to them and I said, hey, put these on your camouflage clothes, you know, and if you get shot, crack it so that everyone knows you're out. And I was like, all right, me versus all you. And they're like, fine. Well, I had already stashed my nods and my helmet out in the woods, and they came out, and I was wearing it, and they're kind of patrolling around, and obviously I could see them. It was like shooting fish in a barrel, and I'm moving from bush to bush, and it's like Predator. They're like shooting in all directions, like, where is he? And I'm just moving around and flanking them and all kinds of stuff, and I smoked all of them. Yeah. And then they went around the campfire, and they were like screaming, like, we're done playing. And I was like, I should have just came out of the woods like without my nods and been like, hey, you guys don't know that I can, like, they taught us how to see at night, you know, but I came out with them down and then they were like, oh, you know, and all that. So, but it was fun, man. And then obviously we were driving the rest of the night. I was letting them drive on my nods, like around the farm. And then we trashed that van and I almost died, but.
I love that. Holy crap. Wait, so you get, let me ask this. It's like a very simple question.
Yeah.
Do you think, how much can you actually apply, like a lot of the tactical maneuvering or anything like that you learn in the teams in like paintball?
Well, that's a good question actually, because so when you play paintball, you're sneaking, you know what I mean? You're sneaking up on guys. You're being real quiet. Like we went to this one like paintball field. It was like an old Western village, you know. And I remember like if you're playing against, you know, the other team, you're not like running into a room like clear, you know, like super fast. Like you're creeping along, you know, and like coming up and sneaking around and peeking and trying to see guys and shoot them. And like because you're hunting guys, right? You're just hunting guys out in the paintball field. And I get in the SEAL teams and like our first assault cell block where you're doing room clearance or CQB, you know, close quarter battle, close quarter combat, CQC. I call it close quarter clearance in all my instructional courses, but all the same thing. You know, it was all dynamic, all running, like come to the door, boom, you know, whether you breach the door, you know, or throw a crash in, like just fast, hair on fire, rapid, like rushing into that room, shooting. It was all live fire, shooting targets. And I'm like, holy crap, man. Like, this is crazy. Because it was totally different than what I had done in paintball. You know, it was just a different mindset. And I was like, man, this is SEAL teams. Like, this must be how things go down, you know, overseas. Well, 3-4 years later, after 9/11, into the wars, back to paintball. All the CQC tactics went back to slow, methodical, deliberate movement, sneaking up. You know, the SEAL teams went away from like breaching every door, you know, running in and, you know, with your hair on fire at like Mach 10 and clearing rooms to like, hey, why don't we just sneak in at night and just find some way to sneak in, you know? And team guys are like, you know, shooting dudes in their sleep. And some of the best ops, like I've heard from various team guys and stuff, when these new tactics started to get thought about and like, hey, we needed to change the way we do business, was guys just switching over to just sneaking in and being real quiet. Because like, I mean, think about it. Like you land your helicopter like we used to, like on the X, right? Like you come up and like boom, that helicopter's right on the target zone. You're running off the helicopter. They know you're there, right? Again, this is not a hostage rescue scenario. It's just capture, kill a bunch of jerks with guns, and then you're running into that structure dynamically, right? Fast in every room. Dude, if they know you're coming in there and they just harden themselves, like guys are gonna get shot. And so many dudes got ate up in those early years because we were doing that. And guys started, there were certain ops where stuff happened and they're like, hey, like, let's just sneak in at night. And then stuff went a lot better. And they're like, yeah, we need to start to think about how we're doing CQC. And because again, it was all the CQC stuff was all like 90s era, even earlier stuff where nobody was actually going after hardened opposition.
Yeah.
It looks cool. You know what I mean? Like, in the movies, it's all friggin' fast.
Yeah.
And it looks cool, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't, if there's someone that's like bed down and they're waiting for you and 4 dudes go running in a room, somebody's taking rounds through that fatal funnel. And so what was called combat clearance, like early on in the wars, just was developed from like guys, just like that hunting mentality, like as a hunter, growing up as a hunter and still hunting now. My parents have 70 acres where I live right now. You're not out in the woods if you're hunting and, like coming around a tree, like wrapping around the tree and then pointing at your prey.
Yeah.
You're like sneaking real quiet.
Tracking.
I mean, you're trying to not even to break friggin', brush or make, noise with leaves. You're sneaking real quiet, getting angles around whatever you're trying to move around to shoot your prey. And it's like the same thing with like overseas doing CQC and assaults. You're hunting humans.
Yeah.
Like, why let them know you're there? Why not? Like, guys were like, hey, why don't we get dropped off by helicopters and hike in to the target, called an offset infill, and sneak in, and they don't even know we're there, until maybe they see a little green glow and they're already getting shot.
Yeah, they're done.
Yeah. So, it's that is the mindset that started to, shift. And then eventually it became a whole new form of CQC that was developed by mostly, guys at development group at Team 6 they were the ones in Afghanistan early, started seeing stuff, and they kind of got their best tacticians together at the command and came up with this, what we called combat clearance, and then the white side team started using it on the East Coast, and then it went over to the West Coast, and essentially it was like, hey, this needs to change ASAP if we want to start like not taking heavy hits of our guys.
So was the original application process, was that built for like combat in Vietnam or something like that? Like, or was it just we had not really had experience with these type of environments, so we weren't necessarily sure?
Mainly that.
Okay.
And it was all, again, like running into rooms with your hair on fire dynamically has application for like a hostage rescue type situation, or like in law enforcement, if there's an active shooter, you're going in. Yeah. But you're willing to risk your life or, for the benefit of to save somebody. So you're willing to put yourself at risk in that situation. But again, like early on in the teams, it was like, we're high speed, SEALs, like we got to be able to do these hostage rescue, ops and stuff. And it just, no one ever thought like, hey, if someone's not being harmed, is there a reason we're just running into the room? Rather than, if there's a door, I mean, there's not a lot of, wood frame doors overseas, but like the space, whatever space you're going to clear, like why not like move across it real slow, like pie back and forth, like see what you can see in that room. If you start taking rounds through the funnel, like frag it, you got options, you can pull back, you're behind cover and concealment. Cause like once you run in, you're committed.
Yeah, you're going.
And more than likely, if there's hardened opposition in there, you're in a 50-50 gunfight. So it was just like, it took a lot of ops, and unfortunately it took a lot of, paid in blood tactics for guys too. Because the biggest problem, like with any tactical shift, whether it's law enforcement or, the soft community, you get guys that ran that tactic and it's like, that's what we do. And so like the older guys, when this shift started to happen, they're like, that's not aggressive. we need to get in there, dominate, and then they started to see like actually, because none of those older guys had ever been shot at, they were all 90s era guys. And like, they started to see the application of it real world and how it worked. And they're like, holy crap, like, yeah, this is something we need to immediately go to if we want to start saving dudes and not putting our operators at risk, like every night.
So they were pretty open to that change. So I've heard before for some of the other guys I've had on the show a lot of times where, because during that time period, it was such a quick, we were, at peace relative. Like there wasn't, guys hadn't maybe had a lot of experience in direct combat. So all of a sudden we're at war. We're getting everyone going. We're going over there with 9/11 and everything. And I've heard at times that, not necessarily with SEAL teams, but just kind of in a general perspective, that some of those people that from the 90s, it was really difficult to get them to shift to say, hey, like, this is where we're at now, and this is the type of people we're fighting, and this is the type of environments we're in. So they were pretty open to kind of switching that, or did it take a lot of...
Yeah, I mean, it's always, you get some bullheaded dudes that like, this is... Because the thing is like, and even in law enforcement, it's like, sometimes I'm trying to work with a department or a SWAT team leader to like buy into my system of training and be trained by me. And let's say they run dynamic as their hostage rescue as their normal. Because there's still a lot of law enforcement groups out there that just use dynamic as their baseline. Like that's just how they enter rooms. And someone like me comes along and starts just explaining them the methodology of like, hey, here's what we experienced overseas. Here's how it worked for us. Here's how it can apply to a law enforcement. I mean, same, you know what I mean? Even more so in law enforcement, right?
Yeah.
Like not having officers make split-second decisions where they have to take someone's life immediately and it could be the wrong decision. Like they have options with deliberate style CQC and pieing off spaces and having as much situation awareness into that space before you run into there. There's so much more application in the law enforcement world, but you get these guys that's what they teach to their guys and they don't want to look bad or they don't, you know what I mean? It's almost like a dick measuring contest a lot of times in the tactical world. And they that's what they teach. And like, they're the guru of whatever that might be. And if they have to switch, it's like learning something completely new and it's uncomfortable for them. But like we had such, not only in CQB stuff, like we had such bad tactics, even in land warfare. I mean, it was all Vietnam era stuff.
Yeah.
Because again, Vietnam was the last time that like team guys were actually in combat before 9/11. Or up to 9/11.
Yeah, I mean, and most of the stuff was, if there was anything, it was very like in out or very quick operations. It was never. This was the first like prolonged war.
Yeah,
like a very specific.
Yeah, not to say that there wasn't any conflicts between them, but all very isolated. Yeah, little, not enough to like develop. Going out every night after night and develop tactics based on what happened.
That's, I guess, referencing, and this would just be. With the whole, I mean, it's been pretty popularized, like Black Hawk Down in the culture and what happened there. And obviously, it seemed like we were not necessarily ready for that type of approach and environment. Do you think that was kind of like a good, that was kind of an indication of why we had to prepare eventually going in, 2003-ish era, where we really had to start shifting like that? Do you think that should have kind of been an indicator? It's like, hey, this is a new type of environment we're going to be entering.
Yeah, I mean, I think that event could have, like, guys that were involved in that could have come back and maybe, had some things to say about, because, I mean, it's like anything else. There obviously that was like a mission gone bad type thing, but you can still learn a lot of stuff from that. But I'm sure guys that were involved in Black Hawk Down, when they were clearing through the streets and all that kind of stuff, like, they were probably running around corners or running in rooms looking for or whatever it might be. And, it's not until you start to take heavy casualties, and because you come back from ops and you don't just like go out on a mission and then like come back and go to sleep. Like you come back, you'll watch the ISR footage, you'll debrief. I mean, you're debriefing the whole thing, right? Like you're watching. And sometimes it can get pretty funny, like watching ISR footage, like certain guys in certain positions, this dude, me falling over, a courtyard, gate here, whatever it might be. There's funny to watch, but you learn stuff from watching that, that footage or debriefing the op. And, when you start to night after night, and you're taking, you're fighting hard in opposition and these types of dudes, like then in the debriefs, you can start to be like, hey, what if, that's when stuff can start to develop. And I'm sure after Black Hawk Down, there's probably some sort of debrief or some sort of, thing that happened after that. But again, it goes back to, it was an isolated thing and it wasn't enough, it wasn't consistent enough to probably change the tactics fundamentally.
Yeah, I would think because I don't think there was ever an expectation of like, that's going to be a place we're going to go back for, granted, different area, but similar, for 20 years. Like that, it was probably never really a general thought. And then obviously, as you're highlighting, it's like once you get there and we start learning real quick, we're like, okay, now we actually got to, readjust in terms of how we prepare for these type of environments and everything.
Yeah. Because like I said, even our like land warfare stuff, like, taking, if you take a contact and you're moving, in elements, like even how we break contact or, flank or move away from that contact changed fundamentally too. Rather than just like, all these dudes are like up, down, to like individual like shooters, like moving in a pair, like you're still moving as an element, but it's like very much like they call it IMT training at the time, like individual movement training, where like a couple guys are moving in a pair, one guy's up, down real quick, and those guys are moving in a pair, these guys are moving in a pair, but these guys might be all part of the same little element here that's working with whatever this element is doing with their movement, but very, moving from one little cover and concealment to cover and concealment. And again, but you can't, like, those tactics change because of getting in ticks and, getting in a tick and then realizing that, like, hey, we can't have all these dudes up and highlighted and their signatures exposed for that amount of time. But in training, it's fine because it's all blank fire, of the little green guys that are coming up and shooting, and they're all automated. Like, and you just don't. It doesn't stick because you're not actually being shot at.
So let's jump into, I guess, what started. I mean, we've gone through a little bit, like what really got the military ambitions going. But I guess when did it first come on your radar that was the path that you wanted to take?
I mean, early on in childhood, like after I saw Predator, after like I wanted to be a commando, but it was more of just like a movie type dream, like, and then once I started to get into high school, I started to be like, hey, can I go be a commando in some, is that real? Like, oh yeah, there's commandos, like there's different soft units, there's all that kind of stuff. So it wasn't until I got in high school where I started like really doing research on if I want to be a commando, what unit do I want to be a part of? And early on, it was all Army orientated, because of Predator and Green Beret stuff. It was mostly Army orientated. But, and I've mentioned this before, I started reading all these different books about all the different soft programs and their selection processes. And it seemed like every book that I was reading was saying BUDS had the highest attrition rate and BUDS was the hardest. And in my mind, I was like, well, that's what I have to do. Like I got to
go hard or go home.
I got to do that one because I can't go to, and I'm sure, all these other soft guys will be like, well, our program's harder than that or whatever. But at least whatever books I was sifting through, it just said Hell Week had the highest attrition and Hell Week was the hardest. And so I was like, well, I got to go do that. Now I wasn't really like excited about water stuff.
I was gonna say I grew up in Illinois.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in swimming in lakes and and all that kind of stuff, but I wasn't like the swimming in general or that kind of stuff wasn't like super interested in, or being on a ship or anything like that. Because I went to the Navy recruiter. I said I wanted to go to this BUDS program, and the guy's like, all right, well, you got to join the Navy, and I was like, well, I don't want to be in the Navy. like, well, you got to join the Navy, and then you can, at the time you can get a contract and you can go try out in boot camp and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, once I got sold on the BUDS thing is that program that I want to go for. That's in high school. I started to become like obsessed with reading all the SEAL Vietnam books, all that kind of, all the books that I could really get my hands on of SEALs and mostly in Vietnam, because that's.
So what was your preconception of what a Navy SEAL was prior to going to BUDS or anything like that?
Oh, just probably like any other person's perception of the sensationalism that you see from Charlie Sheen movies. I mean, obviously that movie had an impact. I mean, it's a badass movie, but like tactically, that movie is total soup. I mean, it's so ridiculous.
Yeah, the one scene with the guy popping out of the water and everything.
Oh man, like that one where they're doing the hostage rescue thing, and the guys they're smashing through the windows, and like they're all online coming in, and like one guy's got an MP5 and one, guy's holding an MP5 in one hand and like a Colt 45 and a pistol in another, and they're just, I mean, it's insane. But it definitely made good for drama, and the movie was cool. But yeah, so basically a sensationalized idea of what it was going to be, and so I, like in high school, like I trained my ass off. Like I mean, I went probably way too far with my training, because I thought I was going to show up to buds and like every dude was going to be just look like Schwarzenegger or ripped, and that's how my perception was.
Yeah.
And then
I feel like I hear that with a lot of the guys too. Because again, it's like before you're going in, it's like every guy's D1 All-American swimmer, football guy, able to do all this, and it's like I got to get up to that level. Like you hear that a lot.
And there is like guys that go to buds that are Olympic level athletes or that quality of an athlete, D1 athlete, but buds is the great equalizer. Like you can be that high level an athlete, you still get cold. You're still miserable. Like you have to be in shape. One of the things I learned with like getting through buds is like, yeah, you got to be in good shape. But when I showed up, like you have white shirts, obviously is pre-Hell Week, brown shirts, you've been through Hell Week. So obviously you're seeing guys in brown shirts from other classes and you're just sizing every guy up, right? And I'm looking around, I'm like, looking at some of these guys in brown shirts, I'm like, oh, I'm doing this. Like, I'm definitely doing this, just because but that's based off of what guys look like.
Yeah.
And, then you realize why it's not one shape, one size of guys that make it through. And it's just, every kind of dude. And it has one common denominator, and that common denominator is they wanted to be there. Like they at all costs, no matter what, they wanted, obviously they're in good shape, but they wanted to be there. They wanted to do it.
So when you're going in high school and you're starting to move to this process, you're saying a lot of your buddies, you guys were all like kind of paintball onto that aspect. Was there anybody else that was kind of going towards the same career path, or were you? Yeah.
So my one of my good high school friends, a guy named Mark Robbins, went to Team 5. We were supposed to go in like a buddy program thing that they had at the time. Like we were going to go in together at the same time. Yeah. And he ended up, I don't know what happened, but he didn't end up going in when I went in, and came in like 6 months later or a year later or something like that. And then I was in 242 and he was in 243. And he went to Team 5, got his eye shot out in Iraq by a sniper, and then got, obviously medically discharged from that. But he became a law enforcement officer up in Northern Illinois.
Really?
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, like
awesome.
He was part of their. I mean, he's going to retire actually here in about, he said, like 4 years or something, because he can buy back his military time or something like that. But yeah, he with one eye, he was like in charge of their narcotics unit or something like that. And he said they were doing CQB one time, and he was coming down a hallway, and it was like a little L to the left, and he was on point, and he like stopped him up, and he's like, hold on guys, I'm gonna do a quick peek, and he pulled his eyeball out. Because he's got all these different type of eyes. He pulls his eyeball out, and he like just kind of like pokes it around the corner, puts it back in. I'm like, all right, we're good, let's keep moving.
That's awesome, man. We're gonna have to talk offline about that. I might want to get him down here too if he's interested, because that'd be a hell of a conversation.
Yeah, he's a hard charger, man. Yeah. I mean, and for him to 7.62, AK round, like in his right eye, just like it like grazed it and came out here. For him to be alive is
miracle.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I mean, and he actually walked off the target because they were carrying him on like whatever they were carrying him on, a skid coat or a stretcher or something like that. Whatever position they had him in on his back, brain fluid was like going down his throat, and it was choking him. And so he just was like, and he stood up, and he's like, I'm walking to the helicopter. And he walked on the helicopter. Yeah, they got to the cache, which was like that main, medical facility in Baghdad. And he walked off the helicopter, went in the cache, and he had like a big rag on his eye. And he said he got in there, and the doctor, said, "What do we got here?" And he pulled it off, and they're like, "Oh God!" Like,
Oh my God.
you got a shot in the head.
Yeah, it's like, how the fuck are you here right now?
Yeah.
Just there. Damn. Wow, man. So that's crazy. Well, I guess so jumping forward then, so you're going into buds, like what was the mindset going in there?
I mean,
Like, did you feel ready?
oh yeah. Yeah, I felt way more prepared than I probably, like I said, I PT'd my rear end off, preparing for it. And that time I put in, before I went paid off, because I was the top in a lot of areas in physical stuff in my class. Like I had we actually talked about this with JP yesterday. He was telling how, reminding me of some of my O course times that I forgot about, but I had like the top O course time. Like I think I had the record for a while on that. I was a top runner in my class. Swimmer, I was in the upper upper part of the class, but I wasn't like, top of the class in swimming. But it was because I put in so much time before I went to prepare myself. And the thing is like, yes, like being in shape does help with buds, because obviously the more you win stuff in buds, the more you get rewarded, or the better you do, the more it's all pays to be a winner thing, right? Mm-hmm. You always get rewarded for putting out and doing well. And so like if you're mediocre, like, yeah, maybe you can get through some of the evolutions, but if you're mediocre, at some point it's going to keep catching up to you, because you're going to get remedial training, you're going to be in the goon squad, and then you're just going to be more tired. You're going to be less apt to, put up better scores. And it's just kind of that
Snowball effect.
And then you find yourself just getting friggin' beat all the time and in the goon squad, and then you're so damn tired that you can't even basically continue, and then it reaches that point where you ring out or you quit or you don't pass whatever evolution it is, because you're just too tired. You're just too physical. Because if buds instructors don't like you, like you won't make it through. Mm-hmm. Like, because they will just get on you like savage wolves and give you extra. They'll just beat you so much before a run or a swim that you can't pass. Mm-hmm. So it's very much like if you get on their bad side because you don't put out, then you're not going to make it. You might be pretty tough, but eventually your body's just not going to be able to.
Yeah, you physically just can't even get there.
So I just told myself, you know what? I'm going to put out as hard as I can. I don't care if it's like a berm run. Like I'm just going to put out and put out and put out. Because my problem is that, you want to be a gray man in buds. Like you want to just kind of, guys will tell you, just like when you go to buds, just kind of don't get noticed for being really good, but don't get noticed for being really bad. Just kind of like blend into the middle, like is a lot of the advice that you'll hear from guys. But how am I, as the vanilla gorilla, as a snow chimp, like a beacon of light with UDT shorts with my shirt off, like how am I going to be a middleman? No. Mm-hmm. Like I was noticed in my back could not be straight for just a moment. And they're like, whoa, get your back straight. Because you look out over the class. Even all those buds videos you see me post, you can tell which one's me immediately. Yep. You're like, oh, there's Ben. The first time I showed it to my kids, they were like, oh, there's dad. Because it's just, I'm so friggin' white. Yeah. And so I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm screwed. If I don't put out, like, I'm screwed. They're going to notice it. And so I'm like, you know what? I'll put out as hard as I can every evolution, doesn't matter what it is, and see where the chips fall. And then that started to develop into them liking you, or knowing respect, knowing they put out. And then you kind of build this weird deranged relationship with the instructors where like, they're like your dad and you're putting out for them and trying to impress them with stuff. And then they kind of like you and they're like, oh, well, it puts out, whatever. And then you kind of build that confidence through that of like, they like you. And then they're not, they're still your enemy or they're still your buds instructor, but you're like, oh man, I'm doing well here. I'm going to put out at this. And then that builds to,
yeah, you feel like the work's paying off a bit, type of deal.
Yeah. You're like, you know what? Like they like me, I'm putting out like things, I'm going to keep putting out and it just builds from there. And then you just, that confidence builds. And then you're like, you know what I'm doing? Like, I'm going to make it through this program. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where my thought was in relation to what I look like and what was going to happen what I knew was probably going to happen in training. I knew I was going to get noticed.
So let's get to the infamous Hell Week. I guess, what were you thinking going into that, or like what knowledge did you really have of what Hell Week was before? And, the simple question, what was Hell Week? What was it like for you?
Well, obviously I had known what it was going to mainly consist of just because of all the books. Mm-hmm. And then you hear, you show up to buds and like, other guys that you run into and they talked about what happened in Hell Week and stuff. But it's always just like, it's never like a full brief of everything. It's more like just little snippets of this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen. And I don't know. I was, again, like I love things I love excitement. I love dopamine rushes. I love anything that's just like, that can provide that dopamine rush and excitement. So for me, it was like, oh, this is going to be a wild week. Like, let's see what they're going to do. Like I was very captivated by just what was going to happen in the week itself, so that captivation of what was going to happen kind of built. I wasn't thinking so much about like, oh boy, this is going to suck. It was like, I was 19 years. I just turned 19. I was like, this is going to be crazy. Like guys might die. Like get to see guys quit. Like I was too excited and interested in actually what might happen to think, to dwell on like, oh gosh, like this is going to be so bad. Am I going to be able to make it through? Like I really wasn't thinking. Now, most guys in Hell Week at some point, like reaches a point where like, this really sucks, man. I can be out of this if I just ring out. Like most guys will like at least entertain the idea here and there in snippets. Like, oh man, because it sucks. But, I was more afraid of calling my father and telling him that I quit than any buds instructor. Mm-hmm. Like that to me would have been like the worst thing on the face of the planet, was calling my dad and saying.
Why do you say that?
I think just because growing up, I was always like the kid, like, look, Dad, like, look at me, like, look what I just did. I shot this, look at my game, and that way that I wanted to impress my father carried over to buds with like now wanting to impress buds instructors, and so forth. But I think that helped me in the long run, wanting to, put out for them almost as a deranged father figure, or this individual that I need to impress, in some way. So for me, it was just like the quitting thing was like, because at the end of the day, again, like during Hell Week, you have to take, like, you cannot take the week as a whole. Like if you sit there, because buds instructors will do that. They'll be like, it'll be Sunday after breakout, it'll be like Monday morning or something or whatever. And they'll be like, oh, all right, you guys, you got Monday morning, you got Monday afternoon, Monday night, you got Tuesday morning. And you start to, most guys quit. And you probably heard this before. Most guys quit in Hell Week in the first 48 hours. Mm-hmm. That is where your majority of quitters happen, because it's too much on the mind for it to handle, to think that this tempo that we just have been doing for the last 48 hours is going to be the week's tempo. It's not the week's tempo, because by Wednesday, Thursday, they're just doing stupid friggin' games with you, just keeping you awake and just doing stupid stuff. You're not like going on swims or, 4-mile time runs or like, major hammer sessions. You're still getting beat here and there, but it's not that consistency or that I don't know, not aggression is not the right word, but like it's not that tempo for the first 48 hours. And so you in your mind, that first 48 hours and what you're experiencing, you're like, no way can I do this for 5 days. For 5 days. Yeah. So they tap out. No shit. And I just thought, all I thought about was, I was excited about what evolution was happening, because it was just like, this is gonna be cool. What are they doing now? Mm-hmm. And then that evolution ended. I was only thinking about that particular evolution at whatever the moment was, and what was transpiring at that moment. And then the moment that was done, I was like, the next evolution, oh, what are they gonna do now with this evolution? Mm-hmm. I wasn't like thinking, what are they going to have us do Wednesday night?
Yeah.
You know, or what are they going to have us do Thursday night? Like that wasn't on my radar. It was just at the moment, like what was happening like in the moment. And then you know that they're going to have to take you out of the surf. You know what I mean? They'll put you in the surf zone, but like at some point that has to end.
Yeah. They can't
Like,
just let you.
that evolution has to end. I mean, otherwise guys are just going to die, you know, which was also part of my weird, you know, way that I am was like, oh, let's see what happens to somebody, like somebody could die or like if they leave us in here all night, like what if we all die? Like it was just, but that was like like kind of interesting or like this again at 19 and this was my world and this is what I wanted to do. That's all I wanted to do. There was no like doubt in my mind and that's what I wanted to do. So, you know, I always tell guys, cause like there's so much fascination with buds. There's a billion things out there, videos and all that kind of stuff. And like, if guys are going to buds, like, hey, tell me what, you know, how I can get through buds and all this stuff. And I said, how bad do you want to do it, man? Like, do you want to do it bad enough? Because that's, in my opinion, that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. Do you want to be there? And how bad do you want to be there? Because a lot of guys that are younger, like me and a couple other guys in the class are the youngest guys in our class. Typically, younger guys don't make it through. There's a higher attrition rate for younger guys. Mm-hmm. Like older guys, you know, and I say older, like mid-20s.
Yeah, like
you know, maybe
years,
been to college, stuff like that. Those guys end up, you know, higher percentage of Bud's class have those guys that make it through because they've kind of established this is what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. Like I am doing this. I went to college. It was filled with a bunch of, you know, libtard granola eaters. I can't stand that. I am doing this, you know, and that's what they decided to do. Whereas like the young guy doesn't really even have life 100% like figured out yet.
Yeah.
You know, he's like, oh, well, like maybe I can try this again at another time or something like that. And if there's any of that doubt stewing in your mind, especially when Hell Week starts by Monday night, Tuesday, that will be immediately on steroids and that will entertain. I would rather not do this right now.
Mm-hmm. Is there any individual that you can recall going through that process, you know, alongside with you, that you looked at them maybe early on and were like, this guy, he's the guy. Like, that's a guy that's going to graduate. He's going to have no problem. And then you saw him crumble and kind of fall apart. Like, was there a guy that stood out to you? And I guess mentally, how did that play against you?
So it was very hard to like assess dudes, you know, to like see if they'd make it or not. Mm-hmm. Like it was pretty hard because it's not like unless they were like your roommate, you know, at Buds, or you know, you weren't spending like copious amounts of time with every dude in the class and really getting to know them and so forth. Like now your roommate, like, you know, you could kind of have a little more of a, is this guy going to make it or not, just because you're interacting with him all the time. They actually had in 241, which Sean Ryan was in 241. Mm-hmm. I did, you know, all his time in the teams was with me, but like he was in 241. We hung out in Buds, you know, and stuff, but he told me that they like other Buds classes would have like a board and like, you know, with guys' names, there's like, who do you think this guy will make it? Almost like a betting thing.
Yeah, like what's it called?
You know, like
the Deadpool, whatever.
Like, hey, you think this guy will make it? Do you think this guy will make it? And like, I don't know if they were actually exchanging like actual bets, you know, and so forth. But one of the things is like they were profiling dudes with like square jaws to see if they were trying to come up with all these little
formula.
Yeah, like dude, they're like all right, like, you know, all these guys with square jaws made it, and it actually was kind of true in a way. Like guys with square jaws made it.
Really?
Yeah, just in an odd way. But my point to it is they were like, is the albino gonna, you know, you think the albino's gonna make it? You know, because again, I stood out to every class, and you know, if any guys like around my time period would remember me only because I'm so friggin' white. Mm-hmm. You know, I had some guy on social media reach out to me after I've, you know, posted my stuff, and he's like, I was in boot camp with you, and I'm like, oh, I don't remember you.
Yeah.
But he's like, yeah, I remember you. And I'm like, probably, yeah, because I cackle like a hyena and I'm white.
Yeah.
But there was one guy in my boat crew that he was doing pretty solid. Like, you know, I thought he was doing solid. I thought, you know, this guy's probably going to make it. And it was either Monday night or Tuesday night. I can't remember which night of Hell Week it was, but we were out in the surf zone. And guys, you can tell definitively when a guy is about to quit. Like usually you can, their facial expressions change, their eyes change, and to a defeated look, and especially if they're not putting out, like, some guys are kind of like, let's motivate the guy and, come on, let's get through this. But I was kind of like, dude, if you're not putting out, I don't want you in my boat crew, man. I'm going to suffer. Like, quit, man. If you're going to quit now, because you're not putting your head under the boat and you're not carrying the log, like all of us are. And it's just going to cause more suffering for me. Quit now. That was my, mentality. Because I also had this like mentality of like, I wanted to see guys quit because I guess it would make me feel more, oh yeah, they're quitting and I'm not, type of thing. But we were in the surf zone and we were locked arms, and I look over at him next to me and he had that look in it, he's like, I could tell he was like, I'm done. Like, no more of this.
Last leg type of deal.
Yeah. Because the surf zone is the equalizer. Like the surf torture and the cold water, I don't care how friggin' in shape you are, you're going to be just as miserable, and no one wants to be cold. And it's always nighttime where the most quitters happen, because it's like you contemplate all night long with the alpha shift, and they're like, you're going to be in the surf all night. And obviously you're not going to be, but that's usually the nighttime is when guys go squirrely and quit. But yeah, so he looks over at me and he's like, man, Ben, he goes, F this. He's like, I'm going to Denny's. And I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah. Gets out of the surf zone, walks up there, rings a bell. He quits.
And goes to Denny's.
Well, so when you quit, you go in this thing called XDiv. This, X Division was what it was called, like for all the pool of buds quitters. And like after Hell Week, I was in the chow hall or something, and I saw him, and he came up and he's like, hey, I want you to know that I really went to Denny's. And I was like, I don't doubt that you did, man. Like, you really, I guess, wanted, I don't know, he thought like, hey, I can be warm, cozy, have a comfortable meal, and I don't have to do this. Like, they're not forcing me to do this.
Yeah.
I am doing this.
I can leave and go to Denny's anytime.
I am doing this on my own volition. I don't have to do this. And he did. So I don't know, I mean, probably definitely looks back on it later in life and, wow, I gave up something really good for a temporary, and that's the thing. It's like, you're going to be warm at some point after Hell Week. You know what I mean? You're going to have a good meal. You're going to go back to pleasantries in life. And you just have to remind yourself, like, I will be warm again. I'm not right now, but I will be, and just push through that momentary suck. Because again, it's only 5 days. I mean, it's not 7 days long. I mean, it's only 5 days. So, but yeah, a lot of those guys, they reach a point where you can tell they're going to quit. They're done. And I'm sure instructors can also, because they see so many students. Yeah, they almost smell it. You know what I mean? Like there could be like an instructor, like 5 boat crews down, and like all of a sudden they just come over to this one dude and start getting on him because it's like they sense weakness, or they sense that guy is not something that they're looking for the program. And then once you get isolated and special attention, especially in Hell Week, you're friggin' in big trouble, man.
It's game over.
Yeah. There's only one guy that made it through my Hell Week, and he made it into the teams. He got so much special attention, not because he was, a weak dude, but like he had a bad interaction with this guy named Instructor Burks that was a maniac. I mean, probably the most evil buds instructor that ever existed. Any guy that went through my time period would be like, oh, he was the worst. I mean, he was like, I remember he bragged about some other bud student dying under his watch. Oh, I mean, just he was. I mean, it was all show though. Like, guys had seen him out in regular platoons at the team. He's totally different. But as a buds instructor, he was, oh my gosh, he's terrible. And my one buddy had a bad interaction with him on the quarterdeck. Didn't know he was literally just checked into buds, didn't even know he was instructor. He came through the quarterdeck. He asked to see his ID. He's like, "Sir, can I see your ID?" And that instructor just flicked him off and kept walking. And then he was like, "Oh, that's funny," doing this. And he was like, "What?" And then he just started hammering him on the quarterdeck. And then, but he was always on him, like reminding, he built that bad connection. But somehow he still made it through because he didn't quit. But if you get special attention,
you're in a tough spot.
Yeah, you're more than likely something's going to happen and you're not going to make it through.
Did you get any special attention for the, we were talking about, it's like you want to be the gray man, but you didn't really have that option. So did you feel like the work that you did beforehand kind of helped you not really put yourself in a position to get that extra attention? Or do you feel like there was any times where you maybe got a little bit just for the sake of kind of that extra testing?
Yeah, so like I was like never really in like a goon squad or anything like that for failing. I never failed a run or a swim, a time, or pretty much, or I never failed an evolution at buds. I was able to go through first time every time for pretty much most of all evolutions in buds. But I got special attention obviously for being just white. Like we had, and it was only like I posted a thing on this just to ask other classes if they remember how long this went on for. They would make you like paint your paddle or personalize your paddle, and I think it only lasted like a very short amount of buds classes. But I painted my paddle white, and I had albino fury in like Old English on the blade part of the paddle, so that got me even more attention because they're like, "Oh, albino fury,
yeah,
let's see how many push-ups you can do, albino fury." And so I maybe shouldn't have done that. But again, I knew that I was going to get noticed anyway, so I didn't really care.
Mm-hmm.
But I luckily was never, and I was fortunate enough to be in pretty good boat crews, because there's a lot of elements in buds that you can't control, and why some guys might wash out that maybe would have made it through, like injuries. Like you get some good guys that are really good dudes and they just get shin splints or they get stress fractures and they don't make it through. Like there's a lot of unknowns that happen in buds that you just can't control. And let's say you get a crap boat crew. Well, guess what? You're constantly going to be getting remedial training or goon squatted or whatever. And that could change the trajectory of like how your performance is because you're so damn tired. And, you end up, at the end of the day, if you don't quit, you're still good. But again, you might not be able to physically pass whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And because I always felt bad for the short guys, like in buds, like the Smurf crew they called them, because they were always losing races because they're short and they just and they were always they were getting freaking smoked, man. So like if you ever see like a shorter team guy, like know full well that their experience was a lot worse than other guys. I remember the Smurf crew like sitting outside of the chow hall a lot of times. Like they weren't even like they were like making them sit out with the boat on their head, eating their food outside the chow hall because they were punishing them. They got the shit sandwich handed to them.
I had never heard that before, but that is actually incredibly interesting. Cause it does make sense. Like there is just like activity level, what your body's able to handle, and like it's, smaller frame and everything, like you're going to get beat up a little bit more having to do all that too.
Yeah. Well, and then if you don't, if you're at that height, that's like, you're kind of tall, but not super tall, like, cause you do height lines for boat crews, and luckily like my height 5'9" is a very average height for dudes. So pretty much like when we ever did a height line and you stacked up with your boat crew, they were all pretty much exactly my height. But if you're like, a little taller and someone else is a little shorter, you can imagine the amount of pressure that your head is on under that boat or whatever it might be is more than theirs. And you're going to be carrying more weight.
Yeah.
And so
moving it forward too is going to be harder.
Yeah. And so that can, that can also be an element in buds that can make you or break your, because running with your boat, if there's one thing in buds that in Hell Week particular, like obviously surf torture is terrible, but I would say hands down, it's running with that damn boat on your head all week and it bouncing on your head. Guys losing hair, like rubbing their scalps raw. You literally think your neck is just going to snap in half. Like just bounce, like running with that thing, just bouncing on your head. Or, they'll maybe put sand in it, and it's even heavier. And that running with that friggin' boat on your head it's I think one of the worst things in my opinion of the misery in Hell Week.
So you make it through, I guess. How did that feel getting through the hardest part at that point? And what did you have any moments during it that you really felt, I guess, what was the closest moment you had during that week where you thought about ringing the bell or stepping away?
I don't know. I guess I would probably say it's something like probably Tuesday night or one of the nights, probably Tuesday night, where that night, the Alpha crew comes in, which were all the maniac instructors, and all the roided out, like just the evilest instructors were on that Alpha crew because they broke it up into like shifts. Like obviously, all the Buds instructors aren't running one shift during Hell Week, so they had all these different shifts, and each shift kind of sometimes had a little bit of a different personality between each one. But I remember that doing surf torture and then bringing you out, bringing us back in, and then they talked about like, all right, we're gonna go do this, but then later on surf torture again. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, if they put us in one more time, I don't. This is terrible. Mm-hmm. But that's pretty much all. That's as far as it went was like, okay, they're again just not trying, not even though they're saying they're gonna put us in later, focusing on what are they doing with us right now? What is this stupid evolution they're doing with us right now? Let's just focus on that. Because again, if you start to, and I think that a lot of life anxiety things in general are overthinking 5 layers deep into maybe something that you're going to be doing next week or something that's, not at the moment. Yeah. That, if you change your trajectory of like, what is happening at this moment in my life and what I'm doing right now, I am going to get through this moment, and then whatever comes after that comes after that. Mm-hmm. It's very hard for our human brains to do that, to not think that 5-layer deep, expectation of what's coming. But especially in Hell Week, if you overthink that in that mindset, you will definitely get into like, yeah, there's no way I can do this. Mm-hmm. There's no way I can do it. And like I said, 48 hours, most guys quit. And you're not that, like in that first 48 hours, you're not that beat up. I mean, you're tired, but you're not like friggin', Friday, around the world, like schnozberries taste like schnozberries, like having, hallucinations and doing weird stuff and checked out, because it's funny. It's like the majority of guys quit the first 48 hours, but nobody quits after Wednesday night. Really? No. Nobody. Now, I mean, you might have guys drop out because of injuries and stuff, but like nobody quits after Wednesday night. Mm-hmm. Because you are on autopilot, man. Like, you're driving, but no one's behind the wheel. Yeah. You're just checked out. And and so you're it's almost like you're a walking zombie in a way, and you're just doing what they tell you to do, and you're just now just on autopilot.
Kind of makes sense. Yeah. I feel like eventually at one point it gets so bad that you almost just like tune out all the noise, and you're just like, we'll get there. Like we'll get there eventually. Yeah. So wrapping up, you finish out Hell Week. I guess what was the mindset there? And then knowing, the next couple steps, you have qualification course coming up. You're going to go through SEER school and all those different items.
Well, all Hell Week is, it's like I don't know what it is now, but like when I went through, it was like the 3rd or 4th week, right when you started training. And all that week is, even in Buds, you don't really learn hardly anything. Like 6 months. The Buds is 6 months long, and then you go to SEAL qualification training, which is like another 4.5 months long. But you don't really learn that much in Buds, especially first phase. I mean, a chimp, like a real snow chimp, could go through first phase and carry logs and get beat. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? There's not a whole lot of intellect involved in first phase or anything, that in depth. But all Hell Week is designed to do is to, hey, these are the guys we want to train. You know what I mean? Because they can't, like our class was 202 guys that started. Like, you're not going to put 202 guys through training. So here's the guys we want to train. All right. They want to be here, right? Back to that. How bad do you want it? Like, they want to be here. Okay. These guys want to be here after Hell Week. We'll start pouring, training into them.
Mm-hmm.
And like after Hell Week is just, that's just the start. Like, you have a walk week afterwards where you're just in tennis shoes, you're not running anywhere, and you go to the pool and do a lot of like hydrotherapy workouts in the pool and stuff, just because your body's so jacked up, man. I mean, it's pretty bad for quite a while. And I was 19, you know what I mean? I can't imagine some guys that were, we had a guy that was 32, a guy named AJ James in our buds class. He was freaking 32, man. And I don't know how he did it, but he did, because I was sore at 19. But the week after is pretty light. You have some classroom stuff and all that. And then you go into Hydra Reconnaissance Week, and this goes back to like, there's stuff that they do in buds that, does it have applications now? Like real world? Like, no. We were doing like Hydra Week. You're learning like old frogman stuff, like taking a shot lead line and figuring out like doing depth soundings and, like the old frogs used to do for marine beach landings.
Yeah.
And surveying a beach in order for them to land, carriers on it, or do beach landings. And that week, like, it's not supposed to be a super intense week, but they hated our class because we had more guys make it through my class than normal, like our Hell Week, like more than usual.
Mm-hmm.
And they hated that, like that more guys made it through. So they were like, we need to still get rid of these guys. we lost lots of guys even after Hell Week. Like throughout the course of the 3 phases of my buds class, we had, I don't know how many, but quite a few guys that made it through our Hell Week that never graduated with us.
Was that just failing out, or was that them like still quitting or leaving?
It was failing out for only basically for like swims, run times, O-course times, that kind of stuff. Cause they were they were really upset that more guys made it through in our class. Mm-hmm. And so like during that Hydro Week where you're learning to do all that, old frogman stuff, like they were sleep depriving us. Like that week, it wasn't as bad as Hell Week, but I remember it was pretty stinking bad. Mm-hmm. Like random room inspections at the middle of the night. Like, they just call our class leader, like room inspection, all your kit on the grinder, like middle of the night, and then beating you for, having one little inkling of sand in a little crevice somewhere. You're not going to, those room inspections, like, it's like, why even, some guys had the attitude in buds, like, I'm not even going to clean my room.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just going to party and hang out and have fun this weekend, and I'm not going to spend all weekend cleaning this room because I'm just going to fail anyways and just take the beating. Some guys had that attitude.
Yeah.
Which, it makes sense to a degree. That first room inspection, everyone's failing, but my room and I passed a fair amount of room inspections after that, but we had an outside guy that does floors come in from San Diego, and he waxed our floor look like a sea of glass, and because that's like the first thing they notice when they go in the room is like if the floor looks really sweet and nice, like everything else looks clean. Mm-hmm. So I think we passed quite a few room inspections because of having done that to our floor. Mm-hmm. But yeah, most of the time you're failing. My worst day at buds was the first day, day 1, week 1 of training, because so you're supposed to lock your doors, your windows and stuff like that. And instructors will try to sneak into guys' rooms, if they don't do that. And my roommate and I thought we locked everything up, but you share a Jack and Jill bathroom with 2 other guys. They didn't lock their bathroom door. So the instructors got in through their window in their room, and then were able to get in our room. They trashed our room. Trashed it. Like we had protein powder, and they were just, this with the protein powder. It looked like a tornado went, just trashed it epically. But we both left our Foot Locker drawers open with our wallets in it. And so after we were done with that first day, which is obviously like it's a bad day because it's like, welcome to buds.
You getting,
and we're done with the training for that day. And all of a sudden they're like, Wallick and my roommate at the time report to Instructor Hansen. And I'm just like, anytime that they're like, report to this, you're like, oh no,
This isn't
going to be good. And so we go in the room and Hansen's sitting there and he's got our wallet sitting out. And he's like, hey, these look familiar to you guys? And I'm like, no, I don't know what that is. He's like, oh yeah. And he opens it up. It's got my stuff in it, And he's like, do you want it back? And I'm like, no, it's yours. I'm good. And then he's like 8 count bodybuilders begin. And this instructor was so condescending. And so he never yelled, but he had this smirk of this look on his face all the time. And he'd beat you, like just looking at you like you are just a disgusting little human. And just looking at you just like you're total scum, And he's like, 8 counts begin. And we're doing 8 counts. And he's like, all right, you guys get to 500 and you can walk away with your wallets and go back to your rooms tonight. And 508 counts. Even doing them fresh in a morning is a lot of friggin' 8 counts, And about 310 or whatever it was, my roommate threw up all over the floor in the classroom. After like I said, about 300 and something 8 count bodybuilders, my roommate threw up. And then he basically just gave us a look of disgust and said, take your wallets and go. So we went back to the room. Well, we went back with the class, and then we got, let off for the day and went back to the room. And we get in there. It was like later at night, and it was so trashed. We didn't even clean it. I literally just put my mattress back on the bed. I don't know if I even put a sheet on it. I just went to sleep.
Just passed right
Yeah,
out.
I'm like, I'm not even dealing with this right now because you're just smoked after that first day. You're done, and that wasn't the way that I wanted the day to end with 300 and something 8 count bodybuilders. But yeah, it is what it is.
So is that like a discipline thing to be like keep your, or is it like a security? Like what's kind of the goal if there? It's just to fuck with you kind of deal.
Yeah, it's like they do all these little things like that to where they're trying to like drive home some important point, like better have your gear squared away and locked tight, but at the end of the day, it's like, is it really that big of a deal that our wallets were in our locker drawer unlocked? No. But it's just a reason to beat you.
Yeah. And if you're overseas, I mean, I hope you guys are doing the shared bathroom right between the two.
Yeah.
Things,
Yeah.
Interesting. So I guess again, so you graduate, finish out Hell Week, everything we kind of just covered, the ups, the downs, how did that feel? And like even adding to that, being able to call your dad and be like, knowing that you made it through.
No, I called my dad and told him I made it through, and he's like, all right. It wasn't a long conversation. It was right after Hell Week, and said, I'm going to bed. Oh, he's like, all right. But he told me before I went through Hell Week, he said, I know you're going to be miserable this week. I'm going to let you know I'm going to be miserable. I didn't know what that meant at the time or whatever, but I had talked to my mom after Hell Week, and she had said how my dad during that week was depriving himself of sleep. He was taking one of the canoes and like walking down to the creek at odd hours and canoeing up the creek and portaging it back. He was fasting a little bit. He was doing stuff throughout that whole week to make himself miserable because I guess he knew I was going to be miserable.
Yeah.
So I thought that was cool.
Yeah, to give you some of that energy. That's awesome.
Yeah, that he did that. So yeah, it was. But even like after Hell Week, now you kind of feel like, okay, like I'm going to do this now. But again, that's like the very beginning of Buzz. So you got a lot more that big hurdles, especially in second phase with some of the pool stuff that you really got to pass or you're not going to make it through the program. So it's not like, made it through Hell Week. Yep, I'm going to be a SEAL. Definitely. That's just literally we're going to train these guys and now you go from there.
Yeah. So I know, and again, going to like qualification course, jumping up ahead, I know there's like multiple different aspects to that, things like SEERS school. And again, like one of the most interesting ones is the fact they'll bring you guys up to Alaska and you guys are doing like kind of winter combatives up there. So
that's at like the end of SEAL qualification training.
Yeah.
You go up to Kodiak for 3 weeks.
Yeah. Jumping ahead to that. I guess, what was the process through all those different areas? And do you have one that kind of stuck out to you that might have been either your favorite or the one where you're kind of like, dang, this is...
Well, one of the things from my era is guys had to go through jump school at Fort Benning. Mm-hmm. Army jump school. Mm-hmm. Terrible. Oh, terrible going through Fort Benning jump school. I mean, the way that the Army does stuff, and I get it, they have to do things a certain way because it's the lowest common denominator and pumping through a lot of guys. But we show up to that school and we were just like, they're not serious with some of the stuff they're doing right now. Just the stupid stuff they were having us do as students. Like, we couldn't believe that this is what they were like. You know, even the way they would come out like initially and present whatever they were teaching, they'd run out and they'd be like, here to the right is the swing tower. You know, and like they do this like this thing and stuff. And we like Bud's guys would be looking at each other like, is this real? Like, are they really doing this? Is like, they gotta be joking. But that's what they would do. And then like you're learning how to friggin' essentially like all static line is learning how to PLF, a pressure landing fall. But I mean, I've been jumping out of trees since I was like a little kid doing pressure landing. Like, I know how to jump from a distance and not friggin' land like with both my feet straight and tear my knees up. Like, I know how to fall and roll into the side. And like, I mean, in literally the whole first week is like jumping off of a little thing and learning how to fall.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, that's why they got rid of Fort Benning as part of the pipeline, because it was 3 weeks of they could teach static line to Bud's guys in like a day or two. Mm-hmm. You know, so I don't know when that shift happened, when they stopped sending guys for jump school to Benning, but for a long time now, they have their own free fall. You know, it's part of the pipeline. So you go through Bud's, SQT, and then you do static line like in a 2-3 day thing, and then the rest is free fall, you know, focused. But yeah, they have to, again, like after you're there for a while, you realize, okay, this is why they have to do things, because of the type of people that you're working with. And not to put any Army guys down or anything, but like, we wouldn't even have a military if it wasn't for like all these dudes in the South, like joining the Army and stuff like that. Like, I mean, we wouldn't have an Army if it wasn't for just all the rural areas and people joining and enlisting and stuff. But it was just like one small story of an example. I had this guy in my stick that was from like deep woods, Kentucky. You could barely understand him. And he was just doing really stupid stuff, like before we did that first jump. And he's like, you know, I'm telling him, I'm like, hey, don't friggin' pull your reserve up there. You know, like, don't do anything stupid, man. Just like do what you need to do and have a good jump. Well, I'd already exited. He went to jump and he froze in the door. Like, he grabbed the door and didn't want to go out. Mm-hmm. Well, they don't allow that. Like, the Sergeant Airborne, they will boot you out of the bird. Yeah, because they have to get guys dropped in a certain, you know, drop zone, or they're going to land all over the place. Mm-hmm. And so, like, that kid grabbed the outside of the door, and it was big black Sergeant Airborne. He's like, oh, no, you don't. Boom! And he kicked him out. Well, because he kicked him out, he exited head first, and which is not good with static line, because when he exited head first, his ankle or something when the chute deployed, got caught, and it ripped his leg up, completely just wrecked everything in his leg. Just totally destroyed his leg. Mm-hmm. But I was down on the drop zone and I was packing my chute up, and I see this guy coming down, and he's screaming. Now this guy's like floating down. He's like, oh gosh, I broke my leg. I need a medic. And he's screaming. And now what's weird is because usually that type of stuff happens after guys land and then they break their leg because they didn't do a good PLF. Mm-hmm. It happens after they get on the ground. But he's screaming. I'm looking up, and what the heck is going on with this guy? And he's like, I broke my leg. And it's like twisted around the risers and stuff. He did like this one-legged landing thing. And yeah. I saw him like a couple days days later at the barracks, and he had this giant cast on his leg. And he's like, guess what, man? And I'm like, what's up, bud? He's like, they kicking me out of the Army. Yeah, and I'm like, so. I bet why. But yeah, and Bud students were hated at jump school because we just did I mean, we did stuff to annoy guys and all kind of stuff. I mean, 241 Bud's class right before us, there was a debacle that happened with them, and 2 other guys got kicked out of jump school like right before they graduated, and like some guys snuck into a Sergeant Airborne's office and took a dump on his desk. And so our class showing up, you know, Sergeant Airborne was like, I knew it was one of you Buds guys who crapped on my desk. So they already hated us.
That's like out of a movie.
Oh yeah. Yeah. They already hated us, and you know, and the thing is like they could beat us like however much they wanted, and it was going to be nothing like beatings and Buds, because you're just finishing training, like you're in tip-top shape, like there's nothing they can do to harm us. So that also annoyed them.
They're also, I mean,
as well.
You know, I can't imagine I've just going through a lot of the different training that you guys are doing at Buds and just General SEAL like qualifications, just all that different stuff. And then you have a guy that's, you know, doing the instruction as if he's like talking at like, you know, a Disney ride or something where, you know, it's like, if that's happening, you guys are just
here
like,
at the
yeah, you guys are just gonna be like, all right, what even is this?
Oh yeah, that was Army appreciation, you know. That 3 week was Army appreciation, and it was rough. So the thing that stinks about guys not, because there's a little bit of a culture like, you know, everyone got to experience that Army experience like with my time period that guys don't. But I also realized like, hey, you don't need to friggin' spend 3 weeks with guys on static line.
Yeah.
You can speed up the process and get guys pumped through the pipeline a lot quicker with starting their own, you know, school like they did. So yeah,
that's interesting. I feel like you're a second guy that's actually kind of like brought up that example, of course, and it is funny how it's like looked back on fondly by you guys, but you're also like, yeah, but we had it
because you had great memories, you know, from there, and like obviously we were always doing stuff to piss off the Sergeant Airborne's, like just constantly doing stuff. Like one of the big things with us was like the drop zone. At the end of the drop zone, there was like this lake/pond, and they always said like, you know, make sure that if you're anywhere near that, you slip away from it. And what I mean by slip away is like you don't have a lot of control with static launch sheets. Like it's kind of like wherever you're gonna land, you're gonna land. The only kind of control you have is like you can grab like 2 of the risers and like pull it down and maybe
tilt a little
yeah,
bit.
you might have a little control. But like we had a pool going of like who could get in the water, like land in the water. Yeah. So when we'd exit, like all the Buds guys, you'd see them slipping towards the lake, like trying to get there. And the Sergeant Airborne would be down there with his megaphone, like, and he'd call you Navy, like he'd be like, Navy, slip away, Navy, slip away from the water, Navy. But we were trying to, you know, one guy almost landed in it, but it was like just short of it. But that's just the kind of stuff that we're doing just to annoy them,
mess with them a bit.
Yeah.
So they would still have you guys working with. Like I would imagine if you guys were gonna, you know, actually some type of operation or something, you guys would be using like the deployables that you're able to kind of navigate a little bit more. Like would they not have you guys work with those? You'd still be using kind of like the baseline stuff that was
doing like team guys doing like real worlds. There's been no SEAL real world mission that's done static line. It's all hey ho, high altitude, high opening stuff.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, unless there was like another friggin' World War II D-Day type thing, and they wanted team guys to jump in quick, like maybe static line. But static line was just not
Just
very
training for the sake of
applicable.
training
Yeah,
type
it was just like it was just part of the pipeline. You know, you gotta do static line training, and I don't know. It was the one other funny thing is like the Sergeant Airborne. I remember he was beating us, and he was beating one of my buddies in particular. And he's like, flutter kicks, Navy begin. And he's doing flutter kicks, you know. And he kind of like, he forgot about him and like turned his direction back to the class or whatever. And it was quite a while where he kind of forgot that he was making my buddy do flutter kicks. And he looks back at him and like 5-10 minutes later, and he's just doing still perfect flutter kicks. and the Sergeant Airborne's like, he's like, damn, Navy. He's like, you can PT. And he's like, how long you think you can go before complete physical exhaustion? And he's just doing perfect flutter kicks. And he's like, 5 days. I thought that was great.
Yeah,
Just
that's
without skipping a beat, he's like 5 days.
You know, the lead there too just has to be thinking like, he's like, damn. He's like, that's pretty funny. Damn. Like,
Yeah.
got me on that.
Yeah.
All right, so jumping forward,
Yeah.
you move into SEAL Team 2, and I know it's pretty notorious. Each of the teams have their own personality, and there's aspects to it. What did you think about going to SEAL Team 2, and do you think it was the right fit for you, at that time in life?
So originally, my guys from my buds class, we checked into Team 8 originally, but we were only there for a very short amount of time. This thing called Force 21 happened where they were basically like revamping all the teams, and we had they needed guys to deploy earlier, so we got chalked over to 2 after like half of a training cycle, and then I was at 2 the rest of my time. So I always just say I was at Team 2 because originally I was Team 8, but then we got switched over to Team 2, right off the bat. But like there was a culture with each team, but it was more so like before 9/11. There was more because each team before 9/11 had like an area of operation. Like Team 2 was the cold weather warfare team, so they would deploy to like Norway and work with the Jaegers and do J sets with the Jaegers and train in cold weather environments. Team 4 was the jungle team. They do a lot of stuff in South America. But again, this is before the wars. Nothing was going on. Like Team 8 was originally like, deploying off of ships and stuff like that. And which I originally wanted to go to Team 4 because all the books I had read, obviously pre 9/11 were like talking about these different areas of operation for these teams. And I was like, oh, I got to get to Team 4 because of Predator, because of the jungle warfare, but I ended up at 2 because you don't really get to pick your team. They kind of let you pick your coast. You can put in for it. Doesn't mean you're going to get it, but you can say, I want to go East or West Coast. And I was telling last night, JP, like most of the guys from our class and we kind of stayed on the West Coast, and there was only a small handful of us that went to the East Coast. But I chose I put in for the East Coast and I got the East Coast just because I didn't really care for the culture out in California. Like,
I can understand that.
Too many granola eaters out there for me. I was like, I'm never gonna be able to hunt out here or do any of that kind of stuff, and so I picked the East Coast. But yeah, like after 9/11, all the teams are doing the same stuff. Deploying the same AOs. So you lost a little bit of that. I don't know what you'd say. Like each team has a particular culture to it, or so forth. I mean, you still had teams that had particular. They had some cultures to them, but it was that kind of went away after 9/11 because it was like now everybody's doing the same thing. Doesn't really matter what team you go to or what team you're at. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Well, so I guess going in, your first combat deployment, you're finally coming in as a SEAL. It started with the movies and paintball in the backyard. Now you're going to do the real deal thing. What was the feeling, as you're really kind of setting up, getting out? You guys know where you're going. Like, what was the feeling there? What was the mindset?
It was still very much like it hadn't set in that like this is actual combat. It was still like, oh, I've been playing guns with my buddies growing up in high school, and now I'm playing guns with buddies in the SEAL teams. And it still had that, I don't know, for me, that feeling of like this is just going to play guns with buddies. But obviously, it sets in that, hey, this ain't friggin' paintball anymore, and it's real. But you still have that, I don't know, like that guys, if you have that mindset of like the other dudes around you, like you don't tend to focus so much on like what's going to happen to me tonight, or am I going to get hit, or you're just more like, for me, I was more concerned about like performing to do whatever I was tasked to do with whatever operation it was with performing for the other guys around me, so that they, almost back to that, like I wanted to impress the buds instructors and stuff. Like I need to perform my job for these guys because I want them to, respect me. And I was telling one buddy of mine, like I had more performance anxiety or anxiety about operations, not from like the operation itself and like what we might encounter, but am I going to do a good job tonight? Am I going to set the breach well? Am I going to, do whatever I'm tasked with on that assault and, and be respectable with all the other guys around me. Like that was more anxiety for me than the mission itself.
Having somebody shooting at you, it's like you want to make sure the guys around you are taken care of, or like you're doing right by them.
Yeah. And that, you come back and they're like, you did your friggin' task so that the whole unit as a whole like functioned correctly because you performed what you needed to do at the right level.
Do you remember the moment where, and I always like to ask this, where it became real, or like where it really hit that the level of stuff had changed, or like really where, you were in the world at that time?
I mean, I don't know. There's so much stuff that like happened overseas that like, I'll give one example with in relation to this. Like, so one of the first times I got shot at was not by insurgents, not, it wasn't like an assault. We were in a sniper hide, and some guys and I, and the Iraqi army was coming through with their tanks, and they saw us or something, or they didn't know who we were, and they just started friggin' shooting at us with belt-fed machine gun on top of the tank.
Seriously?
Yeah. And, you're not going to shoot back at the tank, you know what I mean? You're just, you're hanging it out. And like, we immediately had to get out of that, the hide we were in. I mean, rounds were zipping right over our heads. And there was actually an army sniper guy with us at the time that, we took out with us because their unit was kind of knew that area real well. And he friggin' froze. Like, we realized, like, we do not have good cover in this spot. Like, we need to back up. We need to find something that we can get behind that's actually going to keep us from getting ate up. And we started to back off and find better cover, and he just froze. Like, and we kind of ran back a little bit, and then we realized, like, where's the army dude? And then I actually had to run up and grab him, like, come on, dude, we're getting shot at, man. And it just wasn't registering.
Yeah.
Because I think maybe that was the first time he'd been shot at too. Because there's an eerie sound when it's that close to you, and they're just rocking and rolling. And we once we got him, we backed up behind this giant rock pile, but they're still shooting at us. And it was a small little rock pile thing, and we're on one side, and they're shooting on that side of the rock pile. We're moving over to the other side, like trying to stay like friggin' nut to butt, like so that we're behind this little rock pile, and they're shooting on this side. And then we're trying to get on comms and tell, the QRF, like basically, hey, you need to come in and tell this stupid idiot Iraqi army guys that were coalition forces to stop shooting at us. But that could have gone super south. Like they could have just killed all of us. Yeah. And like those rounds were so freaking close. But I would say like that was like, holy crap, like this, I don't know, you think about it after the fact and like, dude, like this isn't paintball. Like they could have just, and that would have been like the worst, like dying from, you're not like dying on a mission where you got some good work done, and it's just like and fratricide that happens like in Afghanistan with units and all that. Like that's just war, man. Like crap happens, and guys shoot at guys that shouldn't be shooting at each other, and just weird crap like that happens, and you just realize like I am really not in as much control as I think with what we're doing, because there's just so many things that can happen to where that just surprises or things that you don't know that you just can't control. Like you can control like your assault to a degree of like where you want to enter, who's going to be in what positions and all that kind of stuff. But once it goes down, it's very much, you don't know what's going to happen. And that's where things just, you realize like this is no game anymore. Like we are actually going out, and we might not come home. But again, it goes back to most team guys, they didn't, kind of like the Hell Week thing where I told you, like, you don't want to think about, all the 5 layers deep or whatever. Most guys, if you just sat there and dwelled on some op or whatever, like, oh man, I could have got shot, like whatever, it's just, you're going to go out the next night.
Yeah.
Like, it's not helpful for what you're there to do. And if you focus more on, like in Hell Week, it's the same thing where like you don't want to let the guys in your boat crew down. You know what I mean? Like part of my not quitting, which I didn't mention this when we were talking about it, and part of my not quitting also was like, if I quit, you know, at least for a while till they do another height line and get another dude in that boat crew, it's going to be heavier for them. Like those guys are going to suck more. Like I'm not going to be here to put out for them. And so you're constantly thinking about pleasing the guys around you, which I think if you take that into a combat perspective, it also helps because you want to protect the guy next to you. You're more concerned with him than yourself. And then if you have that mindset, it kind of takes away from your fear because you're with them and you're there to protect them. And it helps with being able to process and digest stuff that you're doing that obviously is unsafe.
Yeah.
More.
That's pretty interesting. So I was actually just about to ask that as well, as when you left that initial first time getting shot at and you had a moment to process it. Because there is a lot of people in the situation that would be the army guy that would just freeze and they're like, holy shit, I'm getting shot at. Why do you think you didn't freeze? And do you think when you had time to sit down and process it, where your mind went? Because you're going, like you said, you're going to go right back out the next night. You guys are going to go hit some guys, and this is what we do constantly.
Yeah.
How did you kind of either overcome that or in a lot of ways block that?
I would say that the way that we overcame it was like, it was just a giant joke. Like we came back and we were laughing about it all night. We had a fire and it was like a giant, like it was just funny.
Yeah.
Like it was just it was a fun story. And one of the guys like told the story for the rest of the guys in a very, emotionally charged way and, and all that. And it was just like, I don't know, it was like funny. And you almost have to turn certain things in life. I mean, you find this a lot with like law enforcement and firefighter communities and things like that, where you see some real bad stuff, but you almost make light of that bad stuff with jokes and funny stories about it, just to be able to process it in a way. I mean, it can get pretty dark sometimes with like making jokes about things like, oh, geez, like that's pretty terrible, but I mean, we're joking about it right now. But that's just like kind of, I don't know. But again, like guys in World War II, like if they sat there and mulled over and processed what they just went through at that moment, none of those guys would have been able to really function the way that they did. But they were focusing on the very moment, task at hand. Well, now we just hit the beach. Now we're going to this next city or whatever. And my guys, like, I got to support my guys. Like you just can't, I don't know, you can't spend a lot of time processing certain things that happen on missions or ops and the what ifs, or things like that, because it's just ultimately at the end of the day, it's not going to make you a better operator, and it's not going to make you more capable to do your job. Not saying that guys, that you don't process things that happen, but, and it's good to process things, but at the end of the day, that can't be what is being dwelt on at the moment while you're on rotation and deployed and doing stuff. So it's but again, it's a different. That Army guy, I'm sure he probably did enlist, but I also think there's a huge difference between our community of like guys that this is what they want to do, like this is their passion, like they want to go out on ops, they want to get shot at, they want to shoot at people, they want to get work. Whereas maybe your run-of-the-mill conventional military guy, maybe he enlisted, or back in the day got drafted, but like sometimes they're not, that's not what they exactly signed up to do.
Yeah.
And so they're just in a position where they're like, oh crap, like I didn't know this is what it was going to be. And like all of us, like it's not, we almost like, we wanted activity. I mean, the worst thing for team guys was to be deployed somewhere where there wasn't stuff going on and guys were just chomping at the bit to get to go somewhere where the work was being done. And it didn't matter how bad it was. It didn't matter if it was like going on targets and like, getting in firefights every night. It was like, guys sought after that way more. Guys they were not happy if we were just sitting in Germany or, deployed somewhere else where other guys were in the fight and doing stuff. They just, even like Bud's instructors after 9/11, like some of those guys were like, they wanted to get out of there and go actually off and do the job that they signed up to do. And that's what I loved most and respected about guys in my community is they wanted in the fight no matter what. It didn't matter how freaking sketch it was. They wanted to do it, and they were willing to do it, and they Roger up immediately and go do it.
Do you think there was a level of confidence building knowing that you had all those types of individuals around you as well? So like even if you maybe had a second guess, you had someone there to be like, we're good to go. Like no worries.
Yeah. Like but part of the thing is like, we had such an upper hand with the way we were conducting our operations rather than, the guys that I think that need more credit are the conventional guys like the Marines and the Army where they, like my cousin was in the 82nd Airborne in the initial invasion of Iraq. And he was in patrolling random spots just to get shot. Like there's so much like conventional stuff where like you're just hanging it out there where ours was like, we didn't just do like random patrols or drive around to get IED'd and do like look to get in contacts or whatever. Ours was like a specific mission with, a specific task where we had the element of surprise most of the time. We were going in at night, all that kind of stuff. But the problem with that is it can kind of sometimes build arrogance in the way where like you think you're untouchable. Like you think like, oh man, we've gone on so many of these successful missions and no one's gotten shot. We haven't, we've always had the upper hand and we always win. And some guys can get a little too arrogant to where they don't even think about like the fact that like they could get shot that night or anything because you're crushing it. You're doing so well with what your guy's particular skill set is. But there's also that, where you have these other dudes around you and there's that comfort, like these freaking good dudes. Like I know if we get into something gnarly or sketch, like this guy is going to jump on a grenade for me, or this guy will not stop until his last breath of, protecting me or getting us out or doing what he needs to do in order to go home. So it's definitely working with that. And that's the one thing I miss so much from the teams is working with that caliber of dude, because it's a very different type of man that wants to do that and looks for it and is willing to do it. And you miss working with just that type of guy. Now I'm lucky enough to where in my contract work, I still got to work with guys like that, from different soft units with that one GRS job I did. And it's all the same type of guy.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's team guys, doesn't matter if it's Force Recon guys or, CTT guys in the Air Force or Green Berets or whatever it might be. They're all the same type of guy that you're just like, yeah, man, like these are the type of guys I like to work with.
So you were just talking about it there. You guys going out and, different high value targets at night and everything. Can you remember your first operation with that and what your mind, or I guess what the feeling was, now you guys are getting down and dirty to some of the stuff that you've been prepping for 2 years almost at this point?
Yeah, so one of the misconceptions is like every assault we went on was HVTs, like just really high up the chain type guys. Dude, there was so much like guys low hanging fruit, guys that were really not that important in the big picture of things. And there were so many ops you went on, like, my Fallujah deployment where there was just like a dry hole. Like, the intel was saying these guys are going to be here. It was going to be supposedly a really hot target. And then it's just a dry hole. And it's just to bring some realism to it. It's not, like I said, it's not like you're going out every night and kicking indoors to go after friggin' top of the food chain, terrorists. It's a lot of just, intel stuff is the hugest aspect with whether you were going to get good ops is all intel driven. So, if you didn't have good intel coming, it was just you'd hit targets night after night, and it would be friggin' a big fat goose egg. And then you get one where it was actually something legit, and it was hit or miss, man. Like with that, and yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's not like you're just going after Bin Laden every friggin' especially on the the white side of the teams. You're like tier 1 units are getting even better intel. So they had better ops most of the time because they're just getting better intel. Like any more higher level guys or intel that was higher priority was always kind of shifted, more in tier 1 unit directions. And then sometimes we get low hanging fruit stuff, or the bomb maker that isn't really, you blow his door in or whatever, and he's like, Habibi, he doesn't want to throw down, because he's now like, oh, my friends, like, and it's like, yeah, you were just selling shawarmas at the shawarma stand and making bombs at night, but now you get your door blown open and you're not, you don't want to throw down, because there was a lot of those guys over there that they were just being like paid by Al Qaeda or some, whatever terrorist group was paying them to just do what they were going to do. So they were just financially motivated. Like they weren't really in it for the cause. There's a big difference between, team guys going on targets with guys that were not fundamentalists, like true Islamic fundamentalists, where they were in it for the cause. Like those targets were like those guys, they were in it to win it. Like they didn't care. I mean, they had just as much motivation as the team guys going in there to do what their job is to fight for their cause, which it was Islamic fundamentalism. And a lot of those guys, once the low-hanging fruit guys, like if you started shooting guys or whatever, they weren't in it. They weren't in it for that deep of a cause. And there was just a lot of stuff like that, just with guys that weren't really that motivated to do terrorist activity, but especially when our guys show up.
Yeah, it's busting down the door.
Yeah, and now they're like, yeah, like we don't want to friggin', we don't want to throw down with these guys.
So did that type of political atmosphere or structure kind of surprise you as well? I mean, I know I've asked a lot of guys this similar questions in the past, but it seems like the training, the understanding, like a lot of times you might not get a chance to sit back and think about the political atmosphere that the enemy has, and what that structure looks like, and what you're kind of actually dealing with the individuals there. So did that surprise you as well, seeing that type of atmosphere with some guys fully committed, some guys?
Yeah. So I actually, through my time in the teams, I actually learned and studied a lot about Islam, because I was just fascinated with like what causes these guys to be so motivated, and a lot of the stuff that I researched with it was hair raising to me, with what Muhammad taught, like what he, from, and most people think like the Quran is just you find everything about Islam in the Quran. No, there's tons of other, what they deem authoritative writings in Islam. Like you have the Hadith, which is Muhammad's autobiography of his life. You have different writings from their prophets and stuff that are deemed authoritative. But, when you study the Hadith and the things about Muhammad's life and, what he did when he got power, and essentially friggin' warlord, man, and how he used Islam to conquer, you start to realize real quick, like, these guys aren't like, you always hear like extremists, no, these guys are not extremists. They're fundamentalists. They are following what Muhammad taught to a T. All right. I kind of put it in these terms, like, I'm a Christian and I take the Bible very seriously. So if I were to be, let's say the Bible had stuff that Jesus taught that was akin to what Muhammad taught, I would be a very dangerous individual, because I would take it seriously. I would actually want to follow, the master or whoever I'm is the head of my faith that I'm following. And that's what, they were taking what Muhammad said and taught seriously. And that's why they were so dangerous, is because that's what Muhammad taught. I know that in our society that's so politically incorrect, but it's a reality. Like you don't, you know, you're not, Christians aren't blowing themselves up, you know, in streets. Like, you know, and why are they doing that? Well, the whole martyrdom thing, the whole, you know, dying in jihad, like all of that is not some weird fringy sect. It's part of what Muhammad taught. And so I like I said, I was kind of fascinated with what they, with Islam and like, and all that. And I was like, man, this stuff is not good for our society or, you know, any other society over there. Cause you got the Sunni and Shiites, Sunni and Shiites fighting over hundreds and hundreds of years over Muhammad's spoils still. I mean, just crazy stuff that's like,
yeah, different world type of thing,
Yeah.
especially what we're used to here. What did you view then, again, with, I mean, you're kind of touching it on there, the different types of politics that even goes within that. You know, a really good example is you look at Al-Qaeda and then you look at ISIS, and how if you took from a bird's eye view, if you grab someone on the street, they might say, oh yeah, they're probably friends, like they're one and the same. And on the reality is they're at war with each other just oftentimes as much as they're at war with us. So how do you see that as well? I mean, with those different groups and, you know.
well, it's just there. It's this constant, you know, but again, if you look at Islamic history, like when Muhammad died, because he had so much spoils of like just plunder. Like, I mean, they were ravaging, you know, stuff. I mean, piracy in a sense, you know. I mean, the whole crusade thing, if you look at the real history of that, like Islam was a major oppressor, like an aggressive, violent force, like pirating ships and all kinds of stuff. Like, and they had to figure out something to do about it in order to stop what was happening. But you know, after Muhammad died, they had so much like wealth and power and plunder and stuff. And his military generals were like, okay, well, we're his military generals. We're gonna get the spoils. But then his family bloodline is like, no, we're his family bloodline. We're gonna get the spoils. So you had the Sunni side of the stick, which is like the military generals, and the Shiite side of the stick, which was like the family bloodline. And they couldn't get along over it. And now, like I said, hundreds and hundreds of years later,
Still in the same position.
they're fighting each other over plunder that from Muhammad's spoils. Like it's just, there's no end to there's just no, there's no end. There's no peace. There's no end to it because they won't stop fighting. And there's nothing, we're not going to change that in the West. Like that's just, they're at this point, it's ingrained culture, and they're just, that's what they do. And, you know, obviously we can try to do things for our country to protect ourselves from that. But it's just one of those things that you realize, like, we're not, you know, when I was over there, I was like, you know, this whole, are we going to make them into a democracy and get them to accept American values or become a republic and all that? And it's like, unfortunately, with the way that they are as a culture, it's just not conducive to be able to do that. Like, we're not going to change their culture with our values in the way, because of what this culture has been based off of in America, you know, primarily Christian principles and things like that. They're just, you know, a lot of these Islamic, more fundamentalist leaning nations are just not going to adopt that system.
Of course, go into this at a level of detail that you're comfortable with, but do you remember a time where you kind of recognize that level of enemy you were fighting, like what they were kind of capable of, or what they were, I guess, the extent that they were willing to go?
Well, I mean, one thing where it's like a major shift in like how dark, you know, some of these guys can be is like when you're you know, like using your own children for, you know, purposes to win a fight, or like you're sacrificing your own family, like that to me, you know, being a family man and my 4 children, like you're at a level for the cause that is beyond anything that I can even fathom. You know, strapping friggin', you know, bombs to your children and things like that. It you know, and even the women, you know, I mean, a lot of times it's like the women were involved in it too in some way, like pointing out like where like guys are at targets and like trying to, basically working for the cause as well. So it was like everyone over there you had to just assume was not
against you.
Yeah, was against you, and it didn't matter what age they were. I mean, my heart breaks for seeing just young kids, being brought up in that culture, and young kids trying to fight at like very young ages, and it's like, man, it's like they got no chance. Like they're just being raised in such a violent atmosphere, and it's the atrocities that they will do to other people, and the way they treat human life. It's something that people in the States they can't understand, because we live in a bubble and we don't see the stuff that evil people are capable of, and people are just they're not exposed to it, and it's almost like it doesn't exist to that level until you start seeing what the rest of the world is like, on different, traveling around the world. And unfortunately, my travels have not brought me to anywhere really nice.
Yeah.
And you until you really can't appreciate our culture and what we have in this country unless you kind of get exposed to some of that stuff. I mean, I tell my kids, I'm like, you do not understand how awesome you have it here, because we just assume that this is just the norm, and it's not, man. The rest of the world is just living in. I mean, I was hanging out with my cousin not too long ago, and he's big into watching the whole Ukraine-Russia videos on like Rumble and stuff. And it's like right now, as you and I are, sitting here in these comfy chairs having a fun discussion. I mean, there's dudes doing trench warfare and shooting at each other and just chaos. And we just don't like. I don't know. Where it can become a serious problem is if we have major hardship in this country, which I think that we're headed towards. If the administration doesn't change, if the trajectory of the way things are going in this country don't start to reroute itself and change, we're going to have some economic collapse. We're going to have hard times where, and the worst part about it is like we haven't kind of been, brought up to like having hard, so then we can start dealing with it. Like it's just all of a sudden hard times immediately, and people aren't going to.
We're going to fall off a cliff.
They're not going to fare well.
Yeah.
Like they're just not going to be able to, it would be like, I guess with like buds, like, just taking a student who just enlisted, and then all of a sudden, like the next day, boom, Hell Week starting. They didn't have any of that time, that prep time, and the weeks beforehand, and all that to kind of get sensitized to it, so that they can palate it better when it just hits them. And I don't know. I think we're headed for some dangerous stuff in this country if things continue on the trajectory that they're on.
What would you say to people, or if you had an opportunity to either point them in the right direction, show them, material as we were just discussing, or even just have a conversation with them? And we see that with a lot of people, the younger generation especially, and I say this oftentimes, we see conflicts all around the world, and I'm like, people have to realize that war is never clean, simple. It's not like what you see in the movies. It's not even like what we saw in World War II. We're in a completely different type of atmosphere now.
Yeah.
If you had the opportunity to sit down with those individuals, what would be some of the things you would say or show them?
Well, I mean, I tell them first, like, every day you wake up in this country, you need to appreciate what you have, because we live probably better than ancient kings lived with our amenities. I tell my kid, like, I do stuff with my kids, like we go rock climbing and I make them carry heavy stuff. Like just making yourself uncomfortable is something that you need to do in your daily life, whether it's your workouts that are real hard, something to just take you out of your comfort zone in order to make you realize like life is hard. Like you have to do something like that, because it's if you don't expose yourself to discomfort, like I said, when it comes, like you're not gonna know how to handle it. You're just gonna break down, and you're gonna be. I mean, that apathy that's created from our comfort is a big handicap for when discomfort arrives. I mean, even I've told my kids I want to maybe skip a meal, realize what it's like to be hungry. Like most people don't even know what it's like to be hungry. Like you just hit Grubhub and it shows up at your front door. I mean, no discomfort, hardly at all in life. And you don't and the other thing is you can't really appreciate life unless you have discomfort, physical discomfort. Like, so for instance, like in Buds, like one of the most comfortable things to do or like gave me pleasure was like on the weekend, just laying in my bed watching a movie. I'm dry. I got a warm blanket over me. Like even, I mean, you don't really think about that now. Like you just go upstairs at night, watch a movie and a blanket. But when you're in misery, when you have discomfort, then you start to appreciate that just being dry or being warm, and we have, as a culture, we have to start, reaching our young kids to get off, like I mentioned before, get off the freaking screens, get off the couch. Obesity in this country is through the roof, and start doing stuff that will actually set you up for life, to make you work harder, to make you, no discomfort, to make you more motivated to just go out there and do hard things. Because these kids today, they don't even know how to, they've never been yelled at. The parents are not even, they don't even yelled at. So they go to a work environment and they can't even really function because they're getting, whatever at work because they're not working hard, and they don't even know how to handle just verbal, like being told that's wrong, or, hey, you need to, that what are you doing? Like, they don't even know how to handle that sometimes. And it's dangerous, man. I don't know where we're going to be as a nation with this Generation Z, and the next one after that. It's almost like, I hate to say this, but it's almost like we need something hard as a nation in order to kind of bring us back and have a reality check of life.
Yeah.
To wake us up.
I've heard similar things as well, and I mean I agree. And it's like, you hope that it doesn't have to be too hard for us.
Yeah, I mean, no one wants to go through suck.
But that's
but it's almost like you like, in order to wake us up as a nation, like maybe we do need something like really, really bad economic collapse to say like, hey, if we keep voting these nitwits and these people that want to take away our liberties and want control and just want a slave labor nation to govern us with an iron fist, if we keep voting these people and we're not, smart about who we put in positions of power, this is what we get. It's like we're unfortunately exactly like ancient Rome. If you look at ancient Rome dynamics, like towards their collapse and the tail end of their superpower, we're like right in that cusp.
Right at the top.
Yeah, where
everything starts tumbling.
Yeah, and all the demographics and the things that was happening with Rome before it really went sideways is exactly what is happening in our culture and in our society. And it's scary. I try to tell my kids, like, yeah, we have it great right now. We had a great meal, but listen, this might not be this way in the near future. And you need to accept that and push on and move through and live and regardless. Like, you can't let that just be a break you down to where you can't function. So
for those listening, if you had advice on how to prepare for something like that, for that type of scenario, because whether we like it or not, we're individuals. There's only so much you can really do at some point to enact change. There's always going to be a population of the country that thinks we're on the right track, thinks everything's okay, wants to pretend and
they just want to think that everything's going to be the same.
What would be some of your key recommendations for proper preparedness, or
Well, I mean, obviously, for like the goal of my company, is to train people to be prepared, because again, people don't see the type of evil that I've seen and other team guys have seen overseas that exists, and so they don't think, they think that like, oh, nothing bad's ever going to happen. The cops are there to protect me. I don't need guns. I don't need to protect myself. And it's like, no, man. Like, if the economy collapses, I mean, like, if we're talking like prepping stuff, like, I think everyone should have food for their family, like at least 3 to 6 months. Have food, because if something, I mean, think about if COVID was like if it killed you, You know what I mean? Like if you caught COVID and it was like you were dead. Like, dude, we would have been I mean, think of how
Would be here right now.
think how goofy people got
Yeah.
with a cold flu and how nutty they got going to the Costco's, like ripping through this, like just crazy town. Like you already kind of knew certain people in your society or areas were, a little weak, like kind of crazy or just, but that just, you figured out like who is just nuts to act this way with as menial as really what it was. And, you imagine something like that. And, I tell my kids, like, that when you go to the grocery store, like they're shipping this food here. It's not like the food's not like, here at the grocery store. They're shipping it in from distributors. Well, what if that distribution line gets interrupted? Like, you got to have some food to whatever happens, like to be able to kind of get through that, that moment. But and then if it's total chaos, like a book I really like, it's a fictional book, but it's called 1 Second After. It's about an EMP strike, and it's really interesting. Like what could happen with an EMP strike and the trajectory of losing. Basically, you're back in 100 years ago or 200 years ago, like all technology gone, and how we really don't, as a society, without technology, we can't function. Like it'll be Mad Max, like immediately.
What we're just talking about now, if shit hits the fan and goes sideways, you're gonna have to quickly realize, like, very few people around you are there for you. I mean, I would say this, COVID was 3%. All right, I think it was less, but whatever the mortality rate was at, if you even double that.
Yeah, like say it was like Ebola or something and everyone's dying.
Yeah, or even if it was 6%. Think about how crazy it was over 3. If we double it to 6%.
It would have been chaos.
Yeah, and no one around you has your best interest in mind at that time, or very few do.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in, I was in New Jersey at the time, like right by New York City.
Oh, big cities would be that. With that 1 Second After book, like if you're in a big city, EMP, you're gonna be in total chaos.
Everything changes.
Yeah, and it's like if you don't, like kind of what I promote with my company, like if you don't, as a father especially, like you are the protector. Like you are to protect your family. And I can't think of anything worse than some, father that didn't decide to learn firearms, to learn the way of the gun, and protect his family if something goes sideways, to just have a bunch of thugs and people that are armed and violent, ravaging, and you're just at their mercy. Mm-hmm. They can do whatever they want with their kids, your kids, do whatever you want with wife. Like learn, even if it's not like fun for you, like, a lot of times the guys I'm training, it's like their hobby and stuff, but like learn the way of the gun, like learn how to protect your family because something might happen and you might have to do that. Like it is incumbent upon every father or even females, especially with like, how dangerous some of these guys out there and these predators, to learn how to protect yourself. Even if you don't have a firearm, go to a jiu-jitsu class. Learn something to protect yourself. Mm-hmm. Because you can't rely, like if the balloon goes up, like kind of what we're talking about, like, imagine COVID was like, you died if you caught it and it just went to total chaos. Like there's no law enforcement, there's no one showing up to protect you. You are on your own and it's going to go tribal and you're going to have to, have like-minded people that you network with and be able to, push through and survive something like that. But it is a very real thing that can happen, and we are not prepared for it as a nation.
What do you think about and this is with all the movies that have been coming out lately, the idea of like a quote-unquote civil war? Like would you see that even being like a possibility? I've heard very different views on
I don't. I mean, at this point, I don't see our military, acting on its citizens, but the longer, if we continue this trajectory of, the administration and the policies and, basically brainwashing people for big government stuff, and we get more people in the military that are not, actually think critically about what they're doing, And I don't know. The Civil War thing it's hard to imagine given the fact of how armed people are in this country. I mean, the reason that Japan, I mean, they were originally deciding, maybe entertaining the idea of doing a ground invasion, and some officer had gone to school in the States and they're like, not a good idea. I mean, unless you started like Berkeley, California or something like that. But you start in Texas, not a good idea. Like you're going to get lead slung at you like immediately. But yeah, it's the having food is at least bare minimum to provide for your family if something goes super sideways. I mean, even if there is another virus and all this stuff shuts down, like, what do you just don't eat? You know what I mean? Like, that's just a basic thing that like we take for granted because we have food readily available. But what if we don't? And what if the truck drivers, like, they're not shipping? I mean, there'd be nothing worse than watching your family just starve. So it's a real. I think it's something that shouldn't be looked at as just some sort of fantasy, movie thing that can happen in this country. And if it does, unfortunately, as a society, we're very weak and very just. We're just kind of a pathetic society that relies on amenities and technology to supply all of our needs.
So we were talking about your time at SEAL Team 2, you're able to become a team lead. Can you maybe dive into what leadership means to you, and for being in a position of lead like that in that scenarios, what is kind of necessary to be a good leader?
So if I could think of one characteristic of a good leader, it would be humility. I think all the best leaders have been humble. One of my favorite leaders, from the Bible is David, super humble dude. I mean, badass warrior, but he was humble, and that's part of the reason God chose him for that position. But no one's going to respect a leader that's arrogant, that can't recognize that they have, as a leader, there are certain things that they have to do with the guys that are under them that they might not be buddy in every single aspect, but being able to get down and do menial work with the guys and not lording over the people that you're leading. That's the biggest key, because I think people follow leaders that they can relate to, and that there's not this giant void between the leader and the people. Even in military, sometimes you see, because what always naturally happens, and again back to the humility thing, what happens with leadership or power is it goes to your head. You start to get arrogant, and you start to use that power to basically rule the flock or the sheep and mistreat them. I mean, every dictator is a perfect example. And that even sometimes I've seen it where guys have made rank in the military, and it's like they made one rank to chief or something like that, and now it's like, dude, how did you just all of a sudden change? Because they got more power. And power corrupts. If the person is not humble, power will corrupt, and they will use that power for even more power and trying to use the stature that they've given to now benefit themselves. So I don't think leaders are respected unless they're humble and you do your job, you're good at your job, but you don't boast about it. And then guys naturally tend to have so much more respect for guys that aren't running their mouth, as a good leader. And because maybe some dude is operationally a guru, and they're just an operational friggin' god. They're awesome at it. But, when they run their mouth about it and they brag about it and you can tell right away when you meet a leader and they're you can tell that if they're arrogant or not real quick into that, that time that you're working with them. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I would say is for leaders is being humble. Don't forget where you came from, and lead from the front and be an example to your guys and be willing to get down there and clean up the range, and the brass, be willing to do stuff that most leaders would think like, oh, I'm above that, do that with your guys and they'll respect you.
So you mentioned it there that sometimes, and the classic saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Did you learn this lesson from seeing other individuals maybe do, obviously both the right things, but then the wrong things as well as you were coming up through the teams and everything?
Yeah, I've seen the best officers in SEAL training were the guys that were able to really get with the enlisted guy and just you're both going to do the same job. You recognize, rank in certain aspects in the teams. Now, officers, most of the teams are very enlisted heavy and enlisted run, but I saw it with officers. Just the enlisted man is just he's just the enlisted man. There's an officer handbook in the Navy, and in the officer handbook it says the enlisted man is cunning and devious, and he bears much watching. So they're already training a lot of times big conventional military to have this just catechismical void between enlisted and officer, and you just see them. They get this rank and they just abuse the rank, and it's like you haven't earned our respect just by your rank. You earn your respect out on the battlefield, but also by how you treat us and the way that given your authority and how you use that or abuse it or use it for what you should be using it for. So yeah, I've just seen some officers in my time, and even a few enlisted guys that get some rank, and it's like, dude, you turn jerk overnight.
Yeah, and you were just right there too.
Yeah,
You were
I don't get what. I don't get it. I get now that you can't necessarily be one of the boys to the fullest extent because you have to police guys and be okay, that's, hey man, we got to clean that up or whatever. But the guys forget where they came from and they get, it's the same thing in the civilian world. You get promotions and stuff and it goes right to dudes' heads. And it's, yeah. But again, if they're humble and they recognize, where they came from, if they're humble, I think that their leadership, even if they're not, maybe, I think there's also a lot to leadership that is naturally God-given talents, you're kind of naturally inclined to be a leader. But some guys might not be more naturally inclined to be a leader, but if they stay humble and they treat their guys with respect and try to lead from the front, maybe they're not the best at leading in an operational sense, they'll still have respect and guys will still, want to follow them.
What do you think are the key aspects for operational sense being able to lead? So if, you're in some of these tense combat moments, whatever it might be, what are some of the key aspects that you might take with you?
I think being able to, being able to manage big picture stuff and maintain a calm and collectiveness while this stuff is happening. Because if you're a micromanager and everything needs to be micromanaged and if, again, with micromanagement, if something doesn't go the way of your micromanaging, you start to lose your cool. That. And again, assaults aren't going to go picture perfect. They're just not. Things are going to happen. Things are going to fluctuate. You have to be flexible to be able to, something changes. And if you're just going off this set of this is what exactly we're doing, well, now that doesn't, the whole mission went sideways. Now that's not how it's going to go down. You have to be able to adjust and fluctuate accordingly to now make it work. And if you're just this rigid to where this has to be this way and it doesn't go that way, I don't think you're a good leader, because you have to be able to adjust to what the situation happens and what develops and all that.
Yeah, no, I really like that leadership though. 'Cause It's so interesting is because I feel like so many guys would immediately think, and we see this with certain leaders and community and stuff and whatever. It's like, oh, just because you achieved this, you can be a leader, and it's like that doesn't just because you did something crazy or whatever, it doesn't mean you're a leader. You know what I mean?
or just because you made rank
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you're actually fit for that position.
Mm-hmm. So jumping in, I guess we talked about this at the top, but you had an opportunity to work with the CIA's Global Response Unit. I guess when did that start to when did the conversations around potentially going that angle start?
So when I got out, decided to do contract work. I knew that at the time, some of these contracts were paying ridiculous amounts of money, and I already had 2 children at the time, another one on the way, and I was kind of burnt out from my time in the teams, and I just wasn't around my children very much. And I was like, you know what, like I can make what we need to survive, but be home a lot more, because the thing with the teams is like, obviously you got the deployments, but also the workup schedule. You're just gone at all these training sites all the time. You're gone. I mean, there was like a 6-year period where I wasn't home for more than like 2 weeks 2 weeks long, like you're just never home. Mm-hmm. And I was like, man, I kind of want to try to be more kind of like my dad, like more involved with the family, and I can, make a good amount of money, still do what I love to do, and have more time, because with the amount of some of these gigs that they were paying, I mean, some of those contracts were like $1,000 a day, mm-hmm. Depending on what they were. Like the early days of Blackwater were crazy, amounts.
We know those guys were rocking like $30,000 a month.
Yeah. And so you could go work for 3 months, and for us who are very frugal and just I don't have a large lifestyle, man, I could take 3 months off, mm-hmm. Just the way that it was. But so I originally decided to do that contract from a buddy of mine, a guy named Jeremy Wise, who actually died doing GRS. He was blown up in Afghanistan there was a huge explosion by a suicide bomber, killed a bunch of agency people. So the movie Zero Dark 30.
Oh yes.
That incident where the guy blew himself up, and he worked him for a long time. He was he was going to give him some high value targets, and he tricked them and came in, and then they had a bunch of these CIA people that came down for the meeting, mm-hmm. and they let him not get searched properly, the station chiefs and stuff, and he killed a whole bunch of people. Jeremy was unfortunately involved in that, but he was doing that GRS gig through Blackwater at the time, and he was just telling me how much they pay, going over all the all the things that I need to consider with contract work, with insurance, and everything else like that. So that's kind of how I got directed towards GRS in particular, because there's an endless sea of contracts.
That's what I was about to ask.
That guys can get into. I mean, there's so many gunslinging contracts that you can get into, but that's kind of how I decided to go that route. Now I didn't do it through Blackwater. I did it through another company, but it was the same job.
Your time,
essentially.
Your time with SEAL Team 2, did you guys ever cross paths, or what did you know about Blackwater or some of these other mercenary groups, I guess, at that point? Because that's when they're rising.
Yeah, I mean, you'd see them overseas and stuff like that. We didn't really work with them as far as operationally or anything like that. But, you'd see them. And mainly, you just have the way that the contract world works in the team community is it's very much word of mouth. This guy says, hey, this is a good contract to get on. And then he puts you in touch with this guy. And then it's very much nepotistic to where guys kind of talk about the best contracts that are out there. And that's how you kind of make your decision on which one you kind of want to go do. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of how that happened with Jeremy. He was, unfortunately, that was his first rotation as a GRS guy. My wife, because she was friends with his wife, and sadly, his wife had lost her first husband to a helicopter crash overseas. Yeah, and so my wife was she heard what happened to Jeremy and all that stuff, and she's like, are you going to do the same contract or whatever? And I was like, no, he's with Blackwater. Like, I'm doing a whole different contract. I kind of,
Bent the truth a bit.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't like my wife, like really, I mean, you could ask her in the middle of like, at Team 2 platoon cycles, deployments, like, hey, where's Ben or what's he doing? And she would always be like, I don't know, he's on some trip. Cause I just didn't talk a lot about much with her.
Yeah.
And she wasn't really like wanting to know all the details and stuff. So she just knew I was going on a trip. Like, and someone would be like, you don't even know where he's at? And she's like, well, he's on some training trip. I'm not sure which one or whatever, So I kind of fudged the truth a little bit with, that I was going to do that same job just with a different company. But that's how because the pay was really good and the rotations were, some of those contracts, were like, 6 months long, like you had to commit to being gone. And I wasn't doing any of those. Like, they were 60 to 90 days. Sometimes I'd even allow a month, being gone. So that's kind of why I went that route. But
Can you maybe explain what the GRS unit is with the CIA? I mean, again, most people, and we'll actually get back to that in a sec, but most people, when they think CIA, they're thinking, James Bond, spy, this, that. Some of the guys have had on the show. Like, they're thinking, the crazy, covert guy in a suit, and he's, like, doing spy missions. But, the GRS is, like, one of the most important groups they have within the agency. They're utilized all over the world. So can you maybe explain, what the unit is and
so they're all soft guys. So to get on that contract, you had to have 6 years in a soft unit, whatever soft unit was. A year of that had to be like deployed in a combat zone. And then you had to go through the selection vetting process, shooting and all this other stuff that they push through to get on the program. So it was all soft guys, but which was, again, awesome. Like, there'd be some team guys I'd work with at a site, but a lot of other soft units and stuff. But again, same caliber guys, same type of guys to work with. And you're basically protecting case officers as they go out and collect intel or work their assets. You are their protection. Whether it's mobile, you're going out, essentially it's mobile because you're going out and picking them up and bringing them back and all that kind of stuff. And you're in charge of all the tactical oversight for that move and picking that person up and everything else. So, you talk about the CIA thing, everything's always sensationalized. You know what I mean? And even like these CIA people I worked with, like, oh my gosh, farthest thing from Jason Bourne you could ever imagine. I mean, the fact of the matter is there are no Jason Bournes that exist. There are no John Wicks. There are no, what's his name in the Beekeeper movie that just came out. Like, there's nobody that exists like that with the amount of skill sets, like the Liam Neeson, Taken. Nobody exists like that has that much training and that much. Because like one of the things we talked about in the teams is like we're the jack of all trades, master of none. Because you have so many tactical areas that you have to be proficient in that it's almost like you don't become a massive tactician in just one area. You just got to be good at a lot of stuff. It's just there's just no one that is that good at stuff like the movies make them out to be. Like, it just doesn't exist. And same thing with these case officers. There's a few good ones, but the few good ones were ones that came from soft units and now they were case officer or they had a background like that. And some of the ones they're just college kids that go to the farm and they come out and they think they're Jason Bourne and they're not. And they're terrible. I mean, weapons handling, some of it was terrible. I mean, just like overweight, out of shape, and the biggest thing that I couldn't stand with doing that job was talking about that void between officer and enlisted that can exist. The void between us and the client with like, they just looked at us like a bunch of knuckle draggers that like, uneducated knuckle draggers. And like, we're this sophisticated, they're always trying to climb the ladder,
playing the political game.
Yeah, all big time playing the political game and trying to, you work like the more assets they worked, the more it looked better for their their pedigree, and some of the assets they're working is like they're not getting any good intel at all. It's just garbage. Like because sometimes you're listening to their meet if it's a rolling meet, and you're just driving around wherever you're driving with the asset in the car. You're listening to their conversation through the terp, and you're like, this is like the dumbest stuff they're talking about. Like, and they're paying them copious amounts of money for that. Like, what in the heck is going on? Like, just gross over expenditure of stuff. I mean, it's very political. The agency is very political, and our guys did not mesh well with that. I mean, we just, obviously we were supporting their mission, and so they think that they're in charge and they're the
they're number one and you guys
the head,
just happen
and we're
to-
supporting them. But like the moment we left the wire or went out from whatever fob we were on, and to pick up their asset or do whatever they needed to do, we were in charge tactically. But they thought that they should be, and making dumb decisions and saying, "Oh, let's go over here." We had certain SOPs, standard operating procedures that we'd follow for like going to meet the person and then making a pass, and then if they weren't there, coming back and all that kind of stuff. And they always wanted to like bend stuff and be on the phone with them. Like, no, they're just down at this spot. And we're like, no, we already planned. This is where they're going to be. We're going back now. And because again, we're in charge of that move tactically because we have the experience.
Yeah.
Just because they went through the farm, like they don't have real world tactical experience like all the soft operators that were on that contract to know when something's not right, and be able to, ultimately our goal is to protect them. And so we had to lead that move or that particular mission or whatever it was. Tactically, we were in charge. But it's funny, like one of the fobs I was at in Iraq and Baghdad, like it would get shelled all the time, from like, they were trying to hit the embassy because our little compound wasn't too far from the embassy. They weren't rarely like targeting our little section, but they were always, you have these, at the time, this was, 2010, they had these C-rams, like, so it would detect a mortar and it would say like, incoming, it would make a noise, say incoming. And you'd maybe have like 3 to 5 seconds to get under a bunker or something like that. Dude, like none of our, like you look around at the compound with all the GRS guys, like that thing would go off, guys wouldn't even skip a beat, like wouldn't run anywhere. They're just still jogging or working out, like didn't even like phase them. And all these CIA people would be like running, like scattering like cockroaches, like trying to find cover and freaking out. And like our guys, like we didn't care. Like, cause you could, I mean, if that thing went off and like you weren't like right next to a bunker, like you could run to a bunker, but in the process of you running to that bunker, that might be where it landed. Yeah. So it was just, I thought that was kind of funny. And there was, the one thing that 13 Hours movie nailed was the relationship between like the client and the soft guys. John Krasinski's getting berated for whatever he's been berated for, and guys are flipping tires and bearded out and tatted out and working out, and they got that, how political they were, especially with the Benghazi thing, and at the end of the day, when it goes sideways like it did there, politics are out the window, man.
Yeah. And
now with our guys, like we're salvaging people. Like this is what's going to happen, and I don't care what the political angle is here. That's gone, man. Like it's now time to get the job done for whatever we're given. So
whether it's a personal anecdote or just kind of a general idea, when those situations type happen too, like did you often get a lot of pushback? Because I mean, this is something we'll see. And you're kind of highlighting this as well. You have that 25-year-old got out of college.
Yeah, doesn't know anything and thinks.
Yeah, but he wants to fight back. So was there experiences where you had to be like, hey, kick rocks here, like this is what we're doing, we're sticking with this strategy, and you had to, like, was that always kind of a difficult battle, and like was it something commonplace to face, or did they kind of shut up when stuff really hit the fan?
It kind of depended, it was particular to certain case officers. Like there was certain ones that were egomaniacs, and you knew that if you were on a move with them that day, you're like, oh, I got blah blah blah, because that's the way they acted, and they treated us like crap. Because again, the Neanderthals, over there, and they're the head honcho running, on their move, and you just, there's constant this going on with their politics and stuff that were like, no, we're not doing that. Nope, we're not going to that area. We're not picking them up there. We're picking them up here, like all that kind of stuff. But yeah,
So jumping into the qualifications and I guess training, I mean, you highlighted that you have to have 6 years experience as a SOF, and, you know, it's one of the top tier items. Is there then, I'm gonna get to the farm here in a sec, but is there then a kind of like a pipeline structure of some certain qualifications you have to meet to be able to pick up that contract? Like what are some of the, I guess, barriers to entry other than the 6 year, or genuinely is that kind of the baseline to get through?
No, so you obviously you submit your resume. You have to have a very extensive background check to get on that gig. Where they called I think it was FF7. I can't remember the exact acronym for that certain clearance level that you had to be. Where they're calling like friends and stuff. Which I'm like, my high school or whoever I put down as the people I'm being called. I'm like, hey man, like if you get called, don't freaking
talk about that.
Yeah. Don't be an idiot and say stuff that you shouldn't. But so that was like the initial like with resume and stuff, and then you had to go through the vetting course, which consisted of various shooting qualifications you had to get through, CQB stuff, vehicle work, different things like that. But really the make or break of that vetting course is just the shooting test. Mm-hmm. Like the rundown for the rifle wasn't too difficult. Basically you're moving from like, I think it was 300. It was either 300 or 200 yards moving down various yard lines, engaging targets with your rifle. That most guys were able to pass. The hardest was the pistol qual, because it was at 25 yards. It was drawing from a concealed position, so some sort of covert carry type position where you have to draw from that. And I from what I can remember, it was like 6 seconds for 2 shots at 25 yards from the draw, and then it was different variations of that. But if you threw one round, you were like, you were out. Like because of the scoring on it. Like basically, like there's these things called like an IPSC target, where it's a cutout, and then it has like an A, B, C, D ring, and pretty much all your rounds had to be in that A, almost like imagine like a shoebox, in order to pass that test. And I actually, I'm a pretty good pistol shot. And when I took the final test, the guy, like when he was walking down marking ones that passed or failed, I saw that he put a mark of mine that failed. And I was like, oh shit. And I know when I throw, like, when you shoot enough, you kind of know when you throw a shot, or you anticipate it, you kind of know like, oh, I threw one, and I didn't feel that at all. And I just decided to like, kind of pipe up, and rather than just accepting what he was saying. And I walked down there and I said, hey man, like there's no way I freaking threw a shot. He's like, well, one's missing. And I'm like, dude, you need to look over this target more extensively, because I know I didn't throw a shot. And so he's fine-tuned comb going through every single one. And then he found where I had a burner on one.
Doubled up.
It was where he could tell, okay, that is the second shot. And then he gave me a passing test.
Yeah.
I'm glad I said something.
Yeah.
But
so why do you think that qualification, and again, it's somewhat of a stupid question, but why do you think those qualifications or those type of measurements, like why do they have them so high and so regimented, especially considering most of these guys are coming out of, top special force units?
Because like, I mean, there was like 3 guys in my class that didn't pass the shooting test. Mm-hmm. So just because you have a soft background doesn't necessarily mean, and it also kind of is like, how long have you been out of that background? That plays a huge part into it. I mean, obviously I had literally just left the teams, but like, if you get out, you got a year or two, you've been out and you really haven't been on the gun and you're just doing whatever you're doing, like, you might be rusty. And so it's not just, hey, you have the background, you're hired. Like they still have to vet guys. Unlike this other contract I did for a while too, it was an anti-piracy contract where we sat on container ships. Like at first, that contract, they didn't have any sort of vetting or nothing. Like you just submitted your resume, and if you were a 5326 on your resume, which is the SEAL designation, you could get hired on that contract. Mm-hmm. But there was just dudes on that contract that were like, holy crap, man. Like, when was the last time you shot?
Yeah.
It's like, it's been about, 6 years since I shot you. And I'm like, well, we're on this contract. If like pirates hit this ship, like
You got to be able to
you
shoot.
gotta shoot, man. Like, I mean, the first trip I did, there was a Vietnam guy on the contract. Like, he could barely get up the gangway to get on the ship. He was so overweight, and then we're sighting in off the back of the ship and making sure our guns are doped, and I can tell he can barely see his target, and I'm like, holy crap, man. Like, and then they realized that
Got to make it a little more.
we
restrictive than
need to have it, because like, you know, maybe there was a guy like that I was on one trip with before that vetting course that they then instituted, where, you know, he'd been in like the early 90s and then got out and he like sold insurance or worked for some, you know, paper thing, you know, and never got on the gun, like lived out in California, didn't really had a gun, but like, you know, wasn't avid at the range and stuff. And it's like, dude, you should not be on this contract right now just because you were a
had some
SEAL,
experience.
like, you know, back in the day. Like, you're just not qualified to do this, you know, and then, you know, you got to realize, like, if it was pre 9/11 guys, like, you probably never actually shot at anyone anyways.
Yeah.
Now, most of the guys that GRS job was taken were all GWAT SOF era guys for the most part, guys that had actually been in, because again, you had to have a year of combat.
So that's, and I guess looking at like the firearms, there's a focus on pistols and everything too, concealment specifically. Is there also a higher, are they looking to select for that as well? Like, who has the ability to work in the environments that you'll have for GRS versus obviously SEALs? It's just different types of operations, like different types of combat scenarios you might be faced with? Or is it kind of an expectation that if you've had experience, you should be?
Yeah, that's just kind of goes with the background. Like, you should be able to operate in a, you know, I mean, it's mostly, it's a lot of like urban stuff, you know, depending on where you're at, you know, and most of the guys, again, because like the guys with the backgrounds, they've usually been in those countries that they're working with. They know what to look for, and they know when something's about to go sideways. That these college kids are just gonna, I mean, some of them, like, you know, in Baghdad in the Karate district we were at a lot of times, like they just think it's like they're in like downtown New York City just driving around. Like, you know what I mean? They just were not, they were very aloof and didn't realize like the dangers that exist if we don't follow our tactics properly and what we're doing, how we do business when we go do this stuff.
Yeah.
They're just like, you know, what they treated it very like, I don't know,
I think it's a
not
game.
with like knowing that like, hey, dude, this guy can frickin' meet him and clack himself off, you know, or bring his friends and ambush us, you know, and they just, because they weren't in any of the wars, they weren't in
no
any
combat
conflicts, they just didn't
scenarios.
really know how it really works.
So, we talked about this a little bit. I'd be curious to hear your view on it, especially with having a direct relationship with working in this type of field craft, but then also, you know, having just more probably in-depth knowledge than most do. What is your view on Benghazi and what happened there?
Those guys got completely shafted. I mean, they had our support. They could have really helped them in a major way, but the political game, they basically left those guys hung out to dry, completely. I mean, no questions asked.
Does that change your outlook too as well? That there is, like, how do you feel about that there is kind of all these political happenings as well, especially if
No,
you're doing this type of work?
so I ended up shifting over to that anti-piracy contract, which was, the pay was about the same. Kind of because I was just like, you know, you're at the end of the day, that political game could be your life, you know, and you know, in the teams, like, you still had politics at the higher levels and stuff, but like your regular like day-to-day function stuff, like going out, like, it's not a political game. You're just going out to do a job. But interacting with those agency people and stuff, like, they don't care about you at all. You are an expendable asset. They could care less, you know, about what happens to you or whatever, as long as they get their ends to their means, and they get what they want out of it. And so, I don't know. the anti-piracy thing was just like a no-brainer. Like, you're just protecting people if they get attacked. You know, like it was, and there was no stress involved in that. There was no political. You're just hanging out on a ship with other team guys. You know, it's pretty straightforward. But yeah, that politic game. I mean, and especially like I had one of my best friends like did it for 15 years, and just, I mean, he just seen tons of that crap with the political game. And then when COVID happened, it was I mean, they were quarantine guys that weren't getting the vax, you know, all that kind of, I mean, they were just going nuts with that stuff. And that's when he left.
It's so easy for them to make that like decision of just bailing out or doing stuff for their own good.
Let's cut our losses and
Yeah.
You know, guys at the team, you didn't have that kind of like, it wasn't like, oh, we got to save face with this. Let's just leave all of our dudes hung out to dry. No,
Yeah.
it doesn't exist.
Let me ask that then. What do you think about the rise of mercenary work?
Now,
Both then and now, because
I mean, it's not as heavy, you know, as it was early on in the wars. You know, with especially, I mean, it was, and like I said, endless sea of different contracts you could get on. Like Blackwater started off pretty small, and like it was awesome back in the day because it was very SEAL heavy, you know, and you were working with same caliber guys. And then once they got really big, you're like working next to like a mall cop or, you know, or, you know, something like where it's just like you're not working with the same caliber of guys, and it's like, crap, this is freaking sketch, man, because it's big, you know, big money. And like they got so many contracts, they just don't have the friggin' bodies to film anymore, and they'll just take anybody under the sun that has some sort of resume that might have, you know, something that maybe they can do that type of work.
Yeah.
You know, and so now I don't really know. I've been out of the contract world for a while, and I don't even know like what the best contracts are that are going out there for team guys and stuff. I'm sure there's still a ton of them, but it ain't like it was in the early 2000s, man. It was, and especially the pay with all those contracts, it was insane.
So that's what I mean. I'm curious about those because I feel like obviously, you know, we've toned down some of our presence around in Middle East specifically and everything, but when we were at the height of a lot of stuff going on, contracts really spiraled up. But there's even, you know, mercenary groups that are operating in places like Ukraine. We've heard stuff in Africa, whether it's U.S. related. I'm not saying necessarily one-to-one like, oh, it's CIA or anything like that. It's more so just mercenary groups are really becoming useful for a lot of these countries because exactly what you can say is it gives them plausible deniability. They're able to operate in places that they really shouldn't be, yet, you know, if something goes down, they were never there type of deal. And I'm always interested in hearing that, especially coming from the SEAL teams and, of course, obviously doing work there. But how do you see that? Because that seems like it's a bit of a slippery slope where it's like if mercenary...
So even like everything else, the sensationalism with all this stuff, it's like people hear mercenary and they think it's just like, these guys have the background and they're just willing to make a buck and go do whatever they're told to do, even if it's immoral. But I can speak from, you know, the team guy, the team community and everything else. Like, guys just aren't like that. They're not going to go just make money to go friggin' kill whoever they're told to kill without any, you know, any question or anything like that. They're not going to do that. They're all, you know, guys that like, you know, want to have a moral compass and want to do what's right and use violence when it's necessary, you know, for protecting or you know, combating evil, you know, in a certain way. But it's, again, there's very few like groups out there that are just mercenary groups that are just being paid to go, you know, kill this person. It's just that's a movie thing. It just doesn't exist.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, because it is very, I mean, Wagner is like a really good example of like a country using them early on in Ukraine for kind of plausible deniability. And it's like, it's just an interesting separation that I could see these states creating. Because again, it's like a political game where for them, they, you know,
Yeah.
you don't have to, if you can put the toe in, but you don't ever have to actually fully involve yourself, quote unquote. It's like, you know, then they get all this. And again, you know, we talk about this. people here, we may never find out about it or whatever it might be, but it's like, it's still some of the most important stuff, and it lets them get away with it. And they can just kind of keep screwing us over in the background, and we're just sitting there like, you know, we don't even know what's happening with that half the time.
Yeah.
And I think,
and I'm sure there's units that exist like that from like other, you know, countries, you know, soft units and different like that. But, you know, for American soft guys, like there's just not a lot of guys out there just running in some sort of friggin' unit that's just out to just kill whoever for a freaking paycheck.
yeah, there's like a
It's
moral
just,
compass there.
yeah, that's just not what most guys that I worked with and that I know are into.
So jumping forward into training, you guys did actually go to the farm too for.
No, we didn't.
Oh, you guys. So GRS did not have to.
No, they don't go to the farm. No.
So,
But if you're a direct hire with them, you have access to all the different schools
okay.
that those officers, you know, that are available. But most of the guys, and when I worked, and most of the guys that I worked with were all hired through a contracting company that the agency paid to bring us on. But if you were doing it like my buddy that did it for 15 plus years, in the long haul, he ended up becoming a direct hire, and which was more beneficial for him for pay and all the different schools and all that kind of stuff. It was better to go that route. But yeah, we didn't have to go through the farm or anything like that.
Okay. That makes more sense.
Yeah.
So I guess what would your perspective on that then too? Did you ever feel like, again, we talk about these case officers you're working with, and you know they're out in the field. Like, did you ever feel that there was a disconnect there too because of just the difference in maybe training or background as well? Because again, the farm, for those that don't know, is like very regimented in terms of spycraft or they're like those type of operations.
It's so much more not related to like gunfighting as it is to the field craft of gathering intel and what they did. You know, I actually don't know a ton about the farm other than like, you know, what I've heard from, you know, case officers talking and stuff. But yeah, it's not like you're, you know, learning friggin' CQB at the farm, like, you know, like intensely or anything like that. It's much more, you know, related to intel gathering, and I'm sure you learn a lot of ASOT stuff and secret, you know, or anti-surveillance and techniques and things like that. But yeah, it's not like super heavy. I mean, I'm sure you have weapons, like you probably have to pass some sort of weapons qualification and stuff, but it's probably not anywhere near the realm of like our different contracts that I've been on with what you had to pass as far as shooting tests to get on it. But
so doing your first couple contracts and first couple quote unquote operations, how different was it from obviously what you experienced in the SEAL team? And like, did you expect that going in, or was
oh yeah, I knew it was gonna be 10 times different. Cause like at the team again, like everyone is supporting your mission. All the logistics guys and everything, they're supporting what you're trying to do. With this, we were technically support for what they were doing, which was the weird part. Like they're the client, like we're trying to promote their mission because it's no longer our mission, but then we're in charge tactically. It was odd. It was weird.
So what would a typical operation then look like?
I mean, mostly very, very mundane. Not this whole sensationalized thing. Like,
yeah, crazy hitting up like,
yeah, like so you're on a move for that day. You got a lead car and a follow car. The lead car's got whoever the GRS team got leaders in it, the driver, and it has the case officer with the with the terp in the back. And then the follow car has the guy driving the follow car with the guy that is running comms and communicating everywhere where you're at during that move. And then every day, you'd have moves every day, and it would just, you'd be slated with this case officer for this move. You'd be told where you'd meet with the case officer if you're the TL, plan the move, and then go execute it. And you'd go out, pick them up, bring them back. Sometimes you bring them back to the same fob. Sometimes you go to other areas that they had for meeting places. Sometimes you do a rolling meet where you're just driving around and they're talking while they're in the car. And if, sometimes you'd come back to your fob and you'd bring them, you bring them back, and the case officer and the asset would go have their discussion for a couple hours, and you'd go back to your room or go to the gym, and then get ready to drop them back off. You know, basically a glorified armed taxi service for the most part. I mean, you'd have high threat meets, you know, with certain individuals where, you know, you'd have certain protocols for how that went down and all that, or restaurant meets, you know, we had this restaurant meet downtown Baghdad, and you can imagine like what I look like over there. I'm not Secret Squirrel, right? I'm not like fitting into the populace. And we go into this restaurant downtown Baghdad, and the case officers are meeting with their asset on the second floor. The first floor didn't have anybody in it, there wasn't anybody there yet. Went up to the second floor. You know, we position ourselves in certain spots where they have their little meet or whatever. Well, when their meet was done, you know, we kind of like in advance where we come down, go out to the car before we don't just like walk down with the case officer like willy-nilly. Like we have certain ways that we're gonna now leave the building and go back out to the cars. But I came down the stairs, and like the whole first floor of that restaurant had filled with Iraqis, and it was like I came down the stairs and they were like, "Where the heck did you come from? Like, what are you doing here? Like, you definitely don't belong here."
Yeah, that's probably an American.
Yeah.
And so, how often would you guys face scenarios where situations would go haywire, whether it be
Not a ton. I mean,
Not a ton.
I mean, there was some earlier days in GRS where things were a lot like my one buddy that did it in the early days, like early 2000s, where it was way more sketch, like getting in firefights and stuff. Like, you know, my time period was it wasn't, I mean, obviously there's high levels of threat, but it wasn't as sketch as it was in the beginning with what was happening. So.
That's pretty interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to, because I feel like, again, you get a lot of these movies and everything that'll showcase it, and it makes it look like every situation is, you know, the last second you guys are, and this is obviously, if that was the case, then I'm sure you guys would be doing a lot less meetups and everything, because they make it seem like it's like everything always goes down horribly. There's always, but in general, it's like,
No, a lot of it was just week to week, just 2-3 moves a day, and eat, sleep, and lift, and go take them out and bring them back. I mean,
that's neat.
nothing too glorified.
So is there anything surprising, and you kind of hinted at this as well, is that, you know, you guys would be meeting with some individuals and you're like, is this really that important of a meetup? Like, should we really be meeting with this person? Was it surprising seeing how much value or how much financial considerations we may be putting towards certain individuals or certain intelligence gathering?
Yeah, there was moves where there was just copious amounts of cash being exchanged, like American cash and briefcases and things like that. And then you sit there and you, like, let's say it was a rolling meet where because apart from the rolling meets where you're just driving around with the asset, like you're not privy to the conversation because you're not in the room with whatever they're talking about. But like some of those meets where they were exchanging copious amounts of cash, it's like, dude, you just talked about jack squat. Like your uncle in the consulate, how's his family doing? Like just the dumbest stuff. And you're just like, dude, this is ridiculous. Like, but they're pumping that asset because that looks better on their resume. Oh, I got 5 different assets. I'm working for Intel. But are you really getting any actionable intel that's like going to like our soft guys to go out and hit? You know, sometimes, yeah. But the majority of the time, no.
Did that surprise you coming from Special Forces? Because again, you guys are always, you know, I actually talked to Brent about this as well. I was like, you know, you think the intelligence is like, when you're getting it, you're like, man, there has to be this very big pipeline. And then, you know, you get to go see it firsthand and you're like, we're wasting our time on some of this. I mean,
yeah.
Did that surprise you? Like, would you have thought that when you were in the teams originally, some of the intelligence you guys were getting, like it would be this politically charged at the top or issues like that?
Yeah, I mean, like what surprised me was like the intel that's so wishy-washy and just not really worth it, of like them trying to milk it for something that it's not, especially the agency folks, you know, because again, it's all being in that job over there is very much like corporate ladder. Like you're trying to climb the corporate ladder with your, profession. And in the teams, it wasn't like a corporate ladder. Like, yeah, you're going to make rank and you're going to become a TL or a platoon chief or a troop chief, all that stuff. But that wasn't like the goal was to climb the corporate ladder. Like, and that's very much the focus over there is climbing that corporate ladder and getting more stature and becoming a more, a case officer that is, looked at from the head shed as like, oh, they look at all they're doing. And it's just a very different mindset from the type of environments that I came from with the teams.
So what do you think people get wrong about the CIA? Or if you had to provide general context to
that they're not Jason Bourne. Now there's other branches that I'm not going to talk about because I don't want to maybe put that branch at risk and stuff. But there's other branches that soft guys can get into that are a lot more high speed, that take a lot of tier 1 guys. I have
in the CIA.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have couple friends that work in one of the groups that's even it's like like basically GRS guys want to go into that group because it's again it's a lot more high speed. It's doing a lot more stuff. And so the you get to that level and it's a little more high speed, but again, it ain't frickin' Jason Bourne stuff. It's just not, man. It's even tier 1 units. There's so much sensationalism, and they're all just regular dudes. They're good shooters. They're in shape. They want to do a job that no one else wants to do, and no one is at the caliber that what media and what the movies make them out to be.
And why do you think there is such a massive disconnect there with people? I mean, other than movies or anything like that, but there is this I think there's a weird relationship with CIA, FBI, and the American people right now for a plethora of reasons. But why do you think that there's such a disconnect? I'm sure people clicked on this video purely seeing like there's CIA in the title. Okay, this is probably some crazy,
Yeah. He's gonna, talk about all kinds of secret,
Yeah, or even like
secret squirrel ops and stuff.
Yeah, or they think that there's some type of, you guys are operating in country doing like these crazy stuff. And I know at some level you might be working security and stuff, but at the end of the day, like, why do you think that there is that big disconnect?
Because of movies.
It's purely that kind of.
Yeah, I think it's because of what they only can go off the perception of the reality that they're given from what they see. And, what they see in movies is not reality at all. And they base all their perceptions off of only what the knowledge that they're given. And, some of these agencies are super corrupt and, got corrupt leadership and all kinds of stuff. And it's sad, especially if you have a government that's got corrupt leadership. You can bank on having corruption in all those other agencies. And yeah, I think that's primarily what it is because they only can go off of what they see from movies and what they maybe hear about, through, gossip that's not accurate as well. And, you don't, when you work in these environments, firsthand, you just realize like none of this stuff is as high speed and cool and as it is in reality. Right.
So let's jump into
what you've been working on after leaving there and everything. We talked about it, the coolest logo we've seen on here yet. So you want to give a little rundown of obviously vanilla guerrilla security, what you've been working on, what the motivation was there.
Yeah, so 3 years ago I left kind of doing I don't do contract work anymore. I started doing just instruction. I started working with a company with buddies of mine that retired out of Team 6, out of development group. teaching their company's called Tomahawk Strategic Solutions, and I've worked with them just training SWAT teams in CQC and trying to bring their whole goal is to bring what they experienced overseas and apply it to law enforcement and teach them tactics that will bring them home to their families at night. And so I taught CQC at our assault command the last year and a half I was in to all the East Coast teams. So that's kind of I guess not an area of expertise, but a particular area in team guy stuff that I have a passion for, and I like that stuff the most. And so, I started teaching with them, and then I kind of also started my company about a year ago. And obviously I was when I started my company, I was well, I already have the LLC, from doing that GRS work. And I use that LLC for the Trident Group work with the anti-piracy stuff and all that. So I was man, I'm going to make a logo and just start a tactical training company and see how it goes. And, it's funny because the name's obviously real quirky, and people are like, what kind of security do you do? And which we don't really do any event security or anything like that. It's all tactical training. But I just took the name and, made a logo and ran with it. And so I'm based out of Illinois, 2.5 hours south of Chicago. Peoria, Illinois is where we're based out of. I have 2 other SEALs that work for me locally, which it's pretty rare to have other team guys because we're in rural Illinois type areas, to have 2 other local guys to do classes with you, be instructors. I got a Peoria, Illinois SWAT guy that helps me out with classes as well. And so we teach civilians, all different levels of firearms training. I teach civilian CQC. It's a lot of the first, couple courses with that is very home defense minded, but some of these guys are from big gun clubs and this is their passion, their hobby. And I teach them anything they want to know, with CQC and clearing buildings and using, a lot of it's always paint, paint-based simunition type stuff, which has good value though at the end of the day, because you're still, using your rifle and you're shooting, even though it's paint, you're still on your gun and manipulating your safety and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's we just started getting into law enforcement in Illinois about 6 to 8 months ago. Illinois is kind of odd the way that a lot of law enforcement training works. They don't do a lot of outside vendor type stuff. It's these mobile training units that the state has broken up into, and we ended up getting some of our CQC courses for law enforcement accredited through that system, and then my cadre accredited as instructors. And so the last 2 weeks, before this week, I was up about 2.5 hours from where we live. Me and another team guy that works for me, we're teaching law enforcement guys our 3-day patrol officer high threat CQC course. Basically, responding to a call and there's actually a dude with a gun in that building that wants to throw down, and there's active shooter scenarios involved in it, but it's also hey, how do we move through this building depending on what the scenario is? And if that, scenario shifts to active shooter or people being harmed, how does that look? The difference between deliberate type CQC, kind of what I was talking about before, and the tactics versus that hostage rescue dynamic stuff. And so, we've just kind of been tapping into those. And the mobile training unit by us has hosted 2 of our courses through their unit, with SWAT teams and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of what we're into right now. We hope to get more, Illinois groups that are interested in what we have to offer for training, and kind of give them something new and fresh to look at, with our backgrounds. And, all my cadre, especially with the team guys, have all been in combat. They've been overseas, and seen it real world. And so just trying to bring that, hey, here's what my company offers different than other companies, is guys that have actually done this for real, and here's what we learned.
Yeah.
And then try to put it into a law enforcement application and realm. But at the end of the day, whether it was us overseas clearing rooms, or with dickheads with guns, or a law enforcement officer responding and going in with a jerk with a gun, nothing changes tactics wise. There's going to be differences in ROEs and rules of engagement and stuff that we could do overseas versus law enforcement community, but at the end of the day, it's the same tactics, and what we teach as far as what we learned with that combat clearance in those early years, and trying to see as much of that room before you make decisions to enter it, is very much applies to the law enforcement world right now, with all the strings that they're putting on those guys, and basically not allowing them to do some of the proper policing that they need to do because of all the legalities and all the things they got to constantly, every day they go to work, they got to be, with their body cam and everything they got to watch out for. Our tactics that we're teaching to these law enforcement guys helps them to make better decisions before they actually have to pull that trigger and put someone down. And then now they're gonna have a long legal issue, situation that's going to transpire. And our tactics that we're putting out to them is helping them to reduce risk and liability and make better decisions if they're in a very hostile situation with someone that is bedded down and actually wants to shoot at them. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what we're our focus is, and what we do civilian classes almost every weekend as well. Just from basic pistol, we're going to start doing concealed carry classes here soon. Our instructors are getting certified to accredit for that as well. As well as very advanced stuff that civilians want to do that are into that as their hobby, because I think it's a good hobby.
Yeah,
agreed. It's fun. Going out with the boys and shooting and running and gunning, and then it also has real application for what we talked about. If the balloon goes up and
goes down,
and you got to protect yourself. So.
Yeah, I'm going to be coming up there at one point. We're going to get a session, I'll tell you that, because I've been thinking about, I definitely want to get trained up on that. But working with some of these guys, SWAT, police, whatever, you've come from an extensive background, teams, obviously, with CIA and all that. What has surprised you most working with a lot of these individuals, and just both, tactical development and in general, just the type of individuals they are?
I love law enforcement, dude. Same culture, same, they're just like us. Like they're just, they have a badge, but they're just trying to friggin' protect and go out there and do what they need to do to protect the society. And I love, the culture's a lot, the humor is a lot the same at the time. I love that. But I do see a lot of, because law enforcement officers, weren't like the extensive combat, unless they were guys that were in the wars and then went into law enforcement. You're not just like going out on raids every night, or or getting into the stuff that team guys were getting in through GWAT and all that. So a lot of their tactics, especially CQC tactics, are very old and outdated, and they think it still works, and that's the way they do it, because they haven't really friggin' gone down after a dude that's ready to throw down. So I see a lot of outdated tactics, and like I said, our goal is to, we're very approachable in our training. We don't come into groups and be like, hey, this is how we did it. If you guys don't do it, you're jacked up. I like debate in our classes, to have tactical debates and discussions about what we're putting out, and for them to understand the why behind what we're teaching them. And I take a lot of gratification in them leaving knowing that this stuff will work if I have to go up against, in the worst case scenario out on the street, this is going to work for me in that situation. So that's kind of our focus to instruction, and hopefully the goal of our company with the law enforcement near us is to give them that perspective, and hopefully it makes sense to them, which all the groups that we've trained are like, wow, this makes sense, and I don't know why we weren't doing this before. So.
Oh yeah, brother. Well, I appreciate everything you've done. Also thank you for taking the time to come out here today.
No, man, it's my pleasure, man, to have me on. Like I said, I've told some other guys I did podcasts with, I ain't some big name dude or anything like that. So just someone asked me to come on a podcast, I'm like, yeah, I don't know how much it's going to benefit you, because I'm not friggin' massive following or anything, but hey, I like having discussions and talking about this stuff and getting kind of more of realism out there to what it really is. And ultimately, I'm not going to become some, have my own podcast or be a social media star. I just, if it helps us to get more groups that we can train up and prepare for, things that are ahead or train law enforcement, then hey, that's good for us.
Hell yeah, brother. And like, we were saying offline, again, I think that realism's the most important thing. I think you're going to surprise yourself with how good this episode will do, just because people love authenticity. People love the ability to look at yourself. You've done some incredible things, been a part of some incredible communities, and yet you're still humble enough to sit in a chair, talk about it, and say, I'm no different than you. We all can get to where we need to be. And so again, people really appreciate that, man. So I think you're going to get some awesome feedback with this. If you want to let people know where they can find, everything will be linked below, but just your social media sites.
Yeah, I mean, our website's, www.vanillagrillasecurity.com. Everything's under the Vanilla Grill Security acronym. Our YouTube, Vanilla Grill Security. My Facebook is my name, Ben Wallick, but it's connected with Vanilla Grill Security in some degree. Instagram might be Benjamin Wallick, but it's at Instagram's at Vanilla Grill Security as well. So yeah, those are the only YouTube, Instagram, Facebook are the social media accounts we have. But obviously our website, you can check out, all our classes, and then there's a register for classes tab. Like if you're around us or you want to travel, we've actually had some guys travel from pretty far distances to do some of our home defense CQC classes because how fun they are with our role players and everything that we do with them. I had a guy last weekend from Wisconsin that drove all the way down, and now he's come like a couple times.
I'm telling you, man, I'm going to be up there soon.
Yeah.
We're going to do it.
So yeah, if you're locally, in Illinois and you want good training and you want to, do training without friggin' red tape attached, because we push the envelope depending on what students can handle with doing dynamic stuff on the range and stuff that you're just not going to be able to go do at a static range, indoor range, that they don't allow you to do. So.
Well, perfect, brother. Like I said, I appreciate it. I know this is going to be a good one, and we'll get you back down here soon. I'm going to get up there and make it happen.
All right, buddy.
Awesome, man.
Yeah, man.